Welcome to Mystic Realms Recap. Links are in the description below. Please show some love of the author and me. On to the show.
The great whirlpool that had been spinning for thousands of years suddenly began to accelerate when it was enveloped by the light of the moonlight staff. At the same time, a speck of stardust lit up in the center of the great whirlpool, as if there was a twinkling star in the pitch-black sky at night. However, the light was gradually getting more and more intense. It was as if something was emerging from the great whirlpool. Stars of Fury, I'm finally seeing you again. Lin Li had already acutely sensed the aura of the Stars of Fury from that speck of starlight, and he was certain that what he was about to see would definitely not be something that was condensed out of mana again. The speck of starlight became brighter and brighter until it darted out of the center of the great whirlpool like a bolt of lightning. It hovered quietly in front of Lin Li and rotated slowly like it was on display. Upon sight of the Stars of Fury that he had been searching for such a long time hovering in front of him, Lin Li couldn't help but feel agitated, even though his strength was already at such a high level. This was the Stars of Fury, which was essential for the power of the 7 pieces of the debris of the stars to be fully exerted. The combination of the Stars of Fury and the debris of the stars would form an artifact that could truly destroy the demons and slay the gods. Looking at the Stars of Fury that was rotating slowly in front of him, Lin Li couldn't help but tremble in excitement. He raised his hand carefully and reached towards the Stars of Fury, as if he was afraid of scaring it away. The 7 pieces of the debris of the stars began to appear in the air around Lin Li like satellites before turning into streams of light that flew towards the Stars of Fury that was already in Lin Li's palm one by one. Upon contact with it, they turned into sharp arrows that began shaking and chirping. With the Stars of Fury in hand, most of the anxiety and uneasiness in Lin Li's heart was dispelled. With the power of the Stars of Fury and the debris of the stars, he was already confident enough to face any possible situation. The prehistoric magical beasts and titans in the spatial rifts could no longer pose a threat to him. At this moment, a black spot suddenly appeared in the spot in the sky that corresponded to the great whirlpool, just like a drop of ink in water that spread out rapidly. In the blink of an eye, it had already dyed a large patch of the sky, and a huge inverted vortex formed in the sky, seemingly corresponding to the great whirlpool on the ground. Seeing such a change, Lin Li suppressed the surging emotions in his heart and tilted his head while waiting quietly. One of the important reasons for his visit to the great whirlpool was to obtain the Stars of Fury. However, another reason was that this was also the spot where the largest spatial rift of the disaster had appeared. Besides, according to what High Priest Rog said in the past, a truly terrifying existence that could destroy this world was hidden in the Great Rift. Compared to this terrifying existence, the prehistoric magical beasts and titans were just like cannon fodder that was at the front line of a battle. Standing on the terrace of the omniscient tower, Lin Li waited quietly, while the Stars of Fury in his hand flickered, and the light of the 7 pieces of the debris of the stars formed a radiant sight. The canopy of the City of Destruction opened, and the realm of life and death of the Twin Trees of Eternity enveloped the entire city. All the attack weapons such as magical crystal cannons and Sky Breaker also began charging. At this moment, there was no one else apart from Lin Li at the edge of the City of Destruction, and all the attacks and defenses were taken over by Azardus' soul. In the sky above the City of Destruction, the phantom of Azardus, the Dragon of Destruction, surfaced in the sky and roared when he looked at the black vortex in the sky like Lin Li did. Finally, a figure emitting light slowly emerged from the black vortex, but it was way too small compared to the vortex. It was far from being as shocking as those large prehistoric magical beasts. However, with the appearance of this figure, the light on its body gradually illuminated the surroundings, as if a sun was lighting up in the middle of the huge vortex. The vortex also seemed to have stopped rotating around the sun, and gradually became thinner. When that figure gradually walked towards him, Lin Li frowned, and he looked at the former with great suspicion in his eyes. The veins on the fist that he was holding the Stars of Fury with began bulging, and his knuckles had also turned pale. He seemed to be trying his best to suppress his emotions. When the figure stopped at a short distance away from Lin Li, he finally adjusted his emotions and said in a low tone of voice, "Should I call you Garesco, or the Immortal King?" Lin Li did not expect that the one who appeared in front of him was actually Garesco, who had guided him all the way here. In fact, from the perspective of inheritance, Garesco could be considered his teacher. After all the knowledge of magic that he had was closely related to Garesco. Looking at the figure in front of him, Lin Li was very certain that what he saw this time was definitely no longer a manifestation, but a true god of mages. However, Lin Li did not directly address the figure as Garesco. Instead, he asked such a sentence that others would find unbelievable. Actually, Lin Li, who had been puzzled by the relationship between the Immortal King and Garesko for a long time, suddenly thought of an extremely unbelievable speculation at this moment. Lin Li thought of the time when he defeated that hunter's shadow in the Well of the Sun. At that time, the immortal king had left a message saying that he was looking forward to meeting him in the great whirlpool, but now the one who appeared was Garesko. Although Garesko's shadow said it was returning a favor for someone back in the tower under the cursed island, which seemed to be separating the immortal king from Garesko, Lin Li also remembered that the shadow had begun introducing himself as Garesko at some point. The introduction was rather strange, and he wondered, since he started being Garesko at that time, who was the one before that. Hence, after seeing Garesko's true body, Lin Li asked that somewhat absurd question. I was once the immortal king, but now I'm Garesko. You'd better just call me Garesko, and consider the immortal king as a part of history, Garesko answered calmly, clearly unconcerned about that question. After all, at his current level, his identity didn't matter anymore. However, after hearing Garesko's answer with his own ears, Lin Li couldn't stay calm anymore. There were too many legends about the immortal king, and Garesko and Anril, but no one had ever thought that the two could be the same person. The immortal king created the High Elves dynasty, while Garesko had led a rebellion to overthrow the same dynasty, which was akin to destroying his own achievements. However, considering the level that Garesko was at, Lin Li felt that it was understandable again. Be it the immortal king or Garesko, they had all been existences that were like god of gods. To him, high elves were probably just playthings. In fact, in the eyes of Garesko, human beings and other intelligent races were probably nobodies. Now that Anril was facing an apocalyptic disaster, Lin Li had no choice but to think of Garesko. He wondered, is this also the result of Garesko's intentional manipulation? Just like the overthrowing of the High Elves, Lin Li's thoughts were not exaggerated at all. Garesko had pushed the Tree of Eternity down, and the imbalance in the laws of Anril was also caused by the fall of the Tree of Eternity. Given Garesko's strength, Lin Li did not believe that it was really necessary to destroy the Tree of Eternity to destroy the High Elves. In that case, Garesko's approach was worth thinking about. Well, Garesko, can you now tell me? What exactly do you want? Lin Li had asked himself the question 1,000 times, and he really wondered what exactly was Garesko doing all this for. After learning of the relationship between the immortal king and Garesko, his desire to find out the answer to this question was getting stronger and stronger. At this moment, Garesko was already standing at the top of the entire world, and even the gods had to bow down to him. Lin Li really couldn't figure out just what else Garesko was dissatisfied with after having made so many great achievements. Could it all be just for a game? Frankly speaking, the conjecture was rather displeasing. Although being treated as a pawn and a toy was essentially about the same, a pawn at least had a meaningful existence and served a purpose. A toy was just disgusting. In particular, Lin Li wasn't even willing to become someone else's pawn, much less a toy. Hearing Lin Li's question, a smile appeared on Garesko's face, and he looked at Lin Li with an indifferent gaze. He asked, "Do you think I should be satisfied with my current attainments?" Lin Li froze for a moment, frowned, and sized up Garesko from head to toe before saying, "Given your ability to suppress the gods, there is barely anyone who is a match for you. You have an endless lifespan and great strength. Aren't you satisfied with that? Gods, they are just a bunch of ants, under the supreme law." Garesko's tone was full of disdain for the gods, and at the same time, he seemed to be rather disappointed with Lin Li. He continued, "Under the supreme law, even I am only an ant-like existence. I'm just slightly stronger than the others. If I get all gleeful and complacent from these minor achievements, won't I seem too ignorant?" The supreme law. This was the first time Lin Li had ever heard of such a thing. Everyone knew that this world was composed of various laws that boiled down to the elemental laws. The other laws of things like ice, snow, plants, etc. were derived from these 7 laws. In that case, what is the supreme law? To ascend to the divine realm, a sanctuary powerhouse has to break free from the restraint of the 7 great laws and become a great existence that jumped out of this world. However, Garesko has clearly become a god of gods. Yet, he mentioned a supreme law. According to the words used in your word, the supreme law is something like the right of heaven. Can you understand now? Even the gods still do not get true freedom and immortality from the supreme law. I want to break the supreme laws and be free from all restraint to achieve immortality, Garesko explained with a murderous gaze in his eyes, as if the target he had been finding for tens of thousands of years was close at hand. After hearing Garesko's explanation, Lin Li couldn't help but be surprised by his insanity. At the same time, he was also full of doubts and skepticism about the so-called realm of nothing. However, if the real nothing could be explained, it probably wouldn't be called nothing. It was just like saying the universe was empty. The lack of light was tantamount to darkness, and a lack of temperature was coldness, but darkness was not nothing. Was extreme coldness nothing too? Perhaps. Darkness and extreme cold was a manifestation of the laws. So what kind of existence was that? In the game world, the gods were supreme beings, but they were still bound by the laws of the world in the game. However, after jumping out of the in-game world, they would belong to another world. No one knew if there might be a pair of eyes peeking into the so-called real world, and perhaps there might be another existence behind that peeping person. That seemed to be simply an unanswerable question. Lin Li could not figure it out at all, but he could only put it aside and look at Garesco. How do you know that there isn't another greater law beyond your so-called supreme law? Garesco smiled and looked into the distance, seemingly looking down on the entire Anral. After a moment, he finally said, I know what you're thinking. Actually, it's because I've been to that in-game world of yours, and I know that it's surprisingly just a plaything of another world. So, I'm curious to know if I'm also just a plaything of a higher existence. As for your question, what does it matter if there is a higher law beyond the supreme law? If there is, I'll break it again. Garesco's tone was very flat and calm at first, but towards the end, it finally made Lin Li experience the courage of the god of mages to explore everything, as well as his domineering bravery to break all laws. The path of the mage was exactly as such, manipulating nomological power to break the power of laws. That was probably the most fundamental reason why Garesco could have such achievements. Although he felt that Garesco's appearance was not just to answer his doubts, Lin Li was still impressed by Garesco's spirit. However, despite being awestruck, Lin Li wouldn't forget about his own matters just because of that. Thus, he asked in this case, what does the goal you're working towards have to do with me? Why did you drag me into this world? Don't tell me that it's for the sake of returning a favor. I think you don't believe that reason yourself, either. Garesco didn't answer Lin Li's question directly, and instead looked at Anral somewhat sentimentally as he said with indifference, I was born in the prehistoric times with the Tree of Eternity, and I have witnessed the rise and fall of the ancient Wyrms and Titans. I met the one I loved, and helped her and her race to become the rulers of this world. Only when I lost her did I realize how ridiculous my so-called immortality was. Hearing this, Lin Li seemed to have grasped a crucial detail, although it sounded just like a corny love story. Since the Immortal King had been born together with the Tree of Eternity, wouldn't that mean that the Immortal King was one of the twin Trees of Eternity? One was eternal, while the other was immortal. The Immortal King had merely lost his tree body, leaving Anral with only one Tree of Eternity left. At the same time, another question that Lin Li had also been answered. Why did the Immortal King always have a terrifying aura of death? The founder of the Darkness Shrine, High Priest Rog, had been transformed into a semi-undead existence, precisely because of the death aura that rippled from afar during the battle between the Immortal King and the Dragon of Destruction. Garesco did not pay attention to Lin Li's expression, and seemed to be speaking to himself, instead of Lin Li. However, his tone was calm and slow, as if he wasn't talking about himself at all. He slowly said, I began to pursue true immortality, and this is where I found the passage to another world. Garesco was obviously referring to the Endless World game, when he mentioned the other world. Hearing this, Lin Li couldn't help but coldly ask, so, you set your sights on my hunter character, as well as stars of fury and debris of the stars, didn't you? Without showing the slightest shame for being a thief, Garesco laughed nonchalantly and unabashedly said, yes, that's probably what I meant by the influence of the supreme law. I found out that I could bring what you call virtual items in the game world to this world, and everything would be realized in a tangible form. That's how the stars of fury and the debris of the stars appeared in this world. However, it seems that this did not allow you to reach true eternity and immortality. It seems that even your disciple didn't take you seriously anymore. Lin Li thought of High Lord Osric, and based on the bits of information he had, he reckoned that Osric wasn't very respectful to the Immortal King. That's just a fool who was bewitched and compelled by the gods. This channel is an existence that even the gods would go nuts about, and in order to get information about that world, the gods naturally had to use their brains to extract something from that dimwit. Garesco's mood wasn't affected at all. Although Garesco had been tricked by his disciple, which wasn't an honorable thing, Osric had ultimately already received the punishment he deserved. Lin Li had also heard about some matters of the past from Garesco, such as the fact that Garesco had found the passage to another world, or that the gods and Osric had reached some kind of agreement to obtain the secrets about the passage as well as the other world. Lin Li was reminded of the fact that High Lord Osric had returned to the Eternal Furnace some time after leaving, which Connors had told him about. However, Osric had been seriously injured, and had had no choice but to set up his mausoleum in advance and create a new body, in order to be able to be reborn. Osric's serious injury obviously had something to do with the immortal king. So, is this the reason why you suppressed the gods in the endless ocean? Lin Li thought of the magic tower, under the cursed island where the gods had been sealed. I removed the obstacle that was hindering them from entering this world, and made them think that the passage was underneath that island. I'm afraid those gods that had always been high and mighty would never believe that they'd be sealed there forever. There wasn't a tinge of pride or arrogance in Garesco's tone, and it was as if he was just talking about a trivial matter. However, Lin Li could imagine that things were definitely not as simple as Garesco said. Clearing the obstacle that hindered their entry to this world meant the extermination of the 5 dragon aspects of Anril, which were the 5 great guardians. Deceiving the gods and misleading them into thinking that the passage was below the cursed island definitely took more than just telling a few lies. That made Lin Li think of the endless ocean, and the 7 islands on which there were divine smith-level Magath towers. He reckoned that that was probably the key to deceiving the gods. Although he knew some of the secrets of what happened then, they were not what he was truly concerned about. Thus, he couldn't help but say, "You still haven't said what all this has to do with me." After suppressing the gods, I was left with only one goal, and that was to challenge the supreme law, and to become the one that dominates everything, and is above all. I wanted to achieve true eternal immortality. However, I finally discovered that this body, which gave me great power, had an irreparable flaw that became an insurmountable obstacle for me. To eliminate this flaw, I became Garesco, and overrode everything of the past and severed all ties that belonged to the immortal king. Garesco finally came clean about his relationship with the immortal king, and also stated the reason for overthrowing the high elves. In the other world that Lin Li belonged to before he transmigrated, there was a common belief called karma. In order to obtain higher attainments, and to break the supreme law, the immortal king became Garesco and overthrew the high elves, which was considered a severance of the karma between him and the high elves, as well as his past. Lin Li knew without having to guess that Garesco had obviously also failed to achieve the desired goal. Otherwise, there wouldn't have been a need for Lin Li's transmigration. As he expected, Garesco turned to look at Lin Li again, and said, "Unfortunately, I still didn't succeed. However, I found the reason, and that's you." Me. Lin Li froze in shock for a moment. Even though he knew he had guessed one point correctly, he didn't think that Garesco's ability to break the supreme law would have anything to do with himself. "Yes, it's you. So I went back to the time when I first returned from that world, brought you to Anril, and placed you in the present, which is more than 1,000 years since then. I needed you to grow up so that I could use you to make up for my shortcomings. That's why you and I are here now." After saying that, Garesco looked at Lin Li, quietly, seemingly trying to observe Lin Li's reaction, but he also seemed to be looking at a piece of inanimate material that could make up for his own flaws. Hearing his answer, Lin Li couldn't help but get the chills, because he had suspected that he was being used as a pawn or a plaything, but he'd never expected that he would be treated as a material meant to compensate for someone else's flaws. Facing Garesco, a god of gods, Lin Li, who was merely at the peak level of the sanctuary realm, involuntarily shuddered a little. Lin Li wasn't clear about what shortcomings Garesco was referring to, but he was sure that the hunter avatar that Garesco occupied in the beginning in his life profession account that he had used to transmigrate had to be connected in some way. In that case, Garesco's plan to make up for the shortcomings was clearly a fusion between the two. Of course, Lin Li could be sure that since Garesco had such a great goal of breaking the supreme law to achieve nothingness, which was above all laws, it was unlikely that Garesco would be selfless enough to give up his own body. In that case, the only possibility would be that Garesco was planning to devour Lin Li in order to make the fusion happen. At this moment, a freezing chilliness suddenly spread into his hand, as if it was about to freeze his soul. The fear and scruples that Lin Li had about Garesco, his confusion, and frustration from being at a loss for what to do actually calmed down at this moment. Lin Li, who was slightly calmer now, subconsciously clenched his fist slightly, and the cold and hard sensation surged over again. It was the stars of fury. Garesco was undoubtedly strong, but when feeling the stars of fury in his hand, Lin Li gradually felt a sense of pride too. Even though Garesco was the god of gods, Lin Li had once killed Azardus the dragon of destruction, with the stars of fury and the debris of the stars back in the endless world. How could he not have the courage to fight now? Since Lin Li arrived in this world, he had faced countless opponents, whose strength was far beyond his own. If he had been the type to give up whenever he faced a powerful enemy, he would have probably died a long time ago. He was well aware that regardless of how desperate of a situation he was in, mustering the courage to try and fight for a chance of survival was the only way to find a trace of hope of living. Giving up would only lead to true despair. Of course, Lin Li, who had made up his mind, did not immediately take action against Garesko, and instead just looked at him with contempt. He said, "In this case, why do you need to make these arrangements for me? You could just grab me, and do whatever you wanted to me." Lin Li wanted to know what making up for Garesko's flaws was all about, and he reckoned that it might become a powerful bargaining chip when he was in a desperate situation. He could now vaguely guess that Garesko's so-called compensation for his flaws should be more than just the simple devouring of his soul. If that hadn't been the case, Garesko would not have had to make such arrangements and push him to such a level. Garesko wasn't provoked or angered by Lin Li's mockery, and he seemed to have everything under control. Thus, without hiding anything at all, he said, "It seems that you have already guessed it. Firstly, I don't need a weakling, so I made all of these arrangements so that your strength and capabilities can be improved step by step. Secondly, I want you to willingly give everything you have." Lin Li couldn't help but sneer. The respect he once had for this god of mages had long vanished without a trace, and he coldly said, "Making me give up everything willingly? You might be the god of gods, but you're taking it for granted. I may be weaker than you, but I'm not going to hold myself that cheap." However, a smile appeared on Garesko's face when he heard Lin Li's words, and he said, "Yes, what I want is your heart of resistance and your fighting spirit. If you didn't have it, you wouldn't be qualified to join me in achieving the nothingness above the supreme law." Garesko's answer made Lin Li almost spurt a mouthful of blood. To think that his decision to fight and retaliate was exactly what Garesko wanted. Of course, even so, he did not want to give up resisting, because it was clear that Garesko didn't intend to let Lin Li off even if the latter wasn't qualified. After all, there was no need for a person who didn't have any value to exist. Looking at the changes in the expression on Lin Li's face, Garesko smiled slightly as he seemed to have already seen through Lin Li's inner thoughts. He directly said, "Besides, this may benefit you in some way. You should have probably guessed that something is wrong since you haven't been able to ignite the divine fire and ascend to the divine realm for such a long time." "What do you mean?" Lin Li looked at Garesko with some doubts, and a thought flashed in his mind. Could I have thought wrongly? The flaw I'm talking about is not only within my body, but also in yours. Don't you want to make up for it and take that final step? In fact, it's even possible for you to become nothing beyond the supreme law and achieve true eternal immortality." There was some temptation and yearning in Garesko's tone, which was his desire for the great goal he was pursuing. However, Lin Li remained absolutely calm in the face of Garesko's temptation and coercion. His strength was now only at the peak of the sanctuary realm, and he was still worlds apart from the ethereal realm. Besides, in his opinion, maybe what Garesko meant was to let him devour Lin Li to reach that goal. However, if that was the case, it would be pointless for Lin Li. It was just like a joke. A hunter wanted the polar bear's hide as a coat, and the polar bear wanted to fill its stomach. Hence, the polar bear ate the hunter. The polar bear was satiated, and the hunter, in a sense, also got its hide as his coat. If that was the case, even if Garesko reached that so-called realm of nothingness, what would it have to do with Lin Li? Of course, regarding the matter of a flaw in his body, Lin Li believed that Garesko wasn't lying to him. After all, he had long felt that the sanctuary realm was his limit. Clearly, he was only a small step away from the divine realm, but there was no way he could break through it. Garesko took away Lin Li's hunter avatar, while the body Lin Li used to cross to Anral was initially just a player with life professions. Perhaps the gap between the extremes was because of that reason. Garesko had reached the peak of the divine realm, while Lin Li could only stagnate at the peak of the sanctuary realm. "What good can this do me? Can you bear to sacrifice yourself to let me succeed?" Lin Li asked as he looked at Garesko with contempt. Of course, he wouldn't believe that Garesko had gone to such lengths for the sake of pushing him to the realm of so-called nothingness. Anyone would be able to tell that Lin Li's tone was clearly full of contempt. However, Garesko seemed to have failed to notice it. He opened his arms while facing the sky, and indifferently said, "You're right, that's exactly why I'm here to see you. Why don't we make a deal with each other? If I defeat you, you will willingly make up for my flaw, and if you defeat me, I will naturally do the same, and use everything I have to fulfill your wishes." What a lunatic. That was the first thing that came to Lin Li's mind because Garesko's proposal was akin to making a bet with each other using their lives. However, immediately afterwards, Lin Li couldn't help but laugh bitterly. Garesko wasn't being crazy, but rather he had given Lin Li a benefit that was too much for the latter to take. It seemed to be a bet, but they were worlds apart in strength. One was a supreme existence, who could suppress gods, while the other was just a sanctuary powerhouse, who had yet to even ascend to the divine realm. In the eyes of the gods, sanctuary powerhouses were just nobodies that were slightly stronger than other nobodies. How could they be compared to Garesko, who could suppress the gods? If it was a bet, it would be one without any suspense. Even if Lin Li had already thought of using his life to fight, he didn't think he had a chance at winning. Don't you think that what you said is completely meaningless? You are already a god of gods who stands at the pinnacle of the world, while I'm just a nobody who hasn't even reached the edge of the divine realm. Do you think this is a fair deal? Lin Li mocked hostilely. That's why I gave it back to you, Garesco said with a faint smile as he pointed at Lin Li's stars of fury. Hearing Garesco's words, Lin Li fell silent, and tightened his grip on the stars of fury that he had just gotten. Indeed, with the power of the stars of fury and the debris of the stars, Lin Li would still have a chance of battling gods even if he was only at the peak of the sanctuary realm. However, the problem was that Garesco was not an ordinary god. In the eyes of Garesco, gods were just like nobodies. In that case, could Lin Li really fight against Garesco with the power of the stars of fury? However, since it had come to this point, Lin Li had no other choice but to believe in himself, and in the stars of fury that had accompanied him to create one miracle after another in the endless world. A smile of relief suddenly appeared on the gloomy face of Lin Li, who had been a little nervous and even a little panicky since Garesco appeared. Holding the stars of fury tightly in his hand, he sensed its coldness, and looked at Garesco, who was opposite him. He exclaimed, "In that case, let's fight." Almost at the same time, Lin Li raised the stars of fury in his hand, and an extremely dazzling ray of lightning streaked across the sky before blasting at Garesco with the sound of a thunderclap. The sanguine sky suddenly became dull, and the lightning seemed to have split the sky into two. While roaring, it emitted a massive power that seemed to be able to destroy everything. Under the simulation of the real stars of fury, the power that erupted from the debris of the stars, Thunderbolt, was far from what the power of the counterfeit stars of fury could compare to. The power of destruction and creation contained in the deepest layer of Thunderbolt caused the entire Anral to shake. At the same time, countless laws collapsed in that roar, and it was as if Anral was about to disintegrate in the next second. Under the influence of the power of the debris of the stars, Thunderbolt, countless thunderbolts emerged from the sky above Anral, making it seem like there was an apocalypse in this world amidst the disaster. Countless thunderbolts roared and landed like the rain. Fortunately, they were just ordinary thunderbolts. Otherwise, Anral would probably be destroyed. In the face of Lin Li's surprise attack, Garesco smiled with satisfaction, and slapped the incoming thunderbolt to the side with a wave of his hand, as if he were swatting mosquitoes away. Next, his figure flashed, and he vanished without a trace, leaving behind only his voice that echoed throughout. "If you don't want this world to be ruined, come with me." That was also an important reason why the 5 dragon aspects forbade true gods from entering Anral. Not to mention a battle between gods, each and every move of a god could cause great damage to Anral that couldn't be made up for easily. Although Lin Li had yet to reach the divine realm, the power he could exert with the stars of fury was not inferior to that of the real gods. If he were to really fight with Garesco and Anral, the world would probably collapse completely before victory was decided. Lin Li was certainly aware of that, so when he saw Garesco flying into the void, the 2 pairs of dragon wings of the City of Destruction flapped twice without any delay. The massive City of Destruction immediately vanished, and in the next moment, the City of Destruction had already appeared in the endless void, and stopped in front of Garesco. "This is my divine kingdom, Law." Although Garesco's realm was countless times higher than Lin Li's, he didn't show a tinge of animosity at all. After appearing in the void, he opened his divine kingdom immediately. However, in that void, a massive phantom of a world appeared, and countless chains crisscrossed, almost filling the entire world. Each chain represented the existence of a law. One was fixed in the world of laws, while the other was in the endless void, with no definite end. On the other hand, Garesco stood in the center of all the laws, and all the chains that were composed of laws were swinging like they had come to life, as if they were trying to break out of the divine kingdom of laws world. Lin Li didn't dare to be slow, and immediately unfolded his domain world. However, compared to Garesco's law divine kingdom, Lin Li's domain world seemed rather small and lowly. An extremely realistic world, which was like a microcosm of Anral, appeared around Lin Li. The land was large, the vast sky was blue, the mountains and rivers were dense, and there were waves in the sea. Countless lives continued to be born and reproduce in this world. In this domain world, time seemed to be passing countless times faster than outside, just like a movie in fast-forward mode. The changes of the world and reproduction of life were all developing at a speed that was visible to the naked eye. In the blink of an eye, intelligent beings like humans appeared, and in another blink of an eye, various cities and kingdoms appeared. Next, several wars between kingdoms broke out. With the appearance of a wise man, the beings in the realm world gradually began to believe in a god, who was said to be the creator of the world, and all the beings in it. Several tall statues of that god began to be erected on the earth, and they all looked almost identical to Lin Li. While everyone was worshipping him, several waves of power of faith condensed through the statues. However, Lin Li didn't absorb the power of faith, and the power was instead integrated back into the space of the domain world. That was the reason that Lin Li was never able to step into the divine realm. Only by igniting the divine fire with the power of faith could he become a true deity. Although he could already obtain the power of faith, he couldn't use it, and could only allow it to fuse with the domain world, again for its power to be enhanced. Watching Lin Li unfold the domain world, the smile on Garesko's face did not fade at all. He raised his arm slowly, and pointed a finger at Lin Li. In the law domain world, countless chains of laws seemed to stir up like a million pythons, each of which seemed to be 1,000,000 meters long as they slapped at Lin Li's domain world. In a moment, the chains of laws intertwined, and were woven to form a large web of laws. The nether storm that even the gods didn't dare to touch disintegrated immediately amidst the fluctuations of the chain of laws. Lin Li had no doubt that with the defensive power of his domain world, he might not even be able to block it for a moment. Seeing that a chain of law was blasting over, Lin Li frantically raised the stars of fury in his hand, and 3 rays of light darted out one after another. 3 pieces of the debris of the stars, thunderbolt, polar snow, and raging flames, moved towards the chains of law. Thunderbolt darted out, and immediately crossed the void to blast at the chain of law. In an instant, a brilliant ray of light emerged from the spot where the collision occurred. Layers of fluctuations spread out in all directions. The meteoroids that had been floating in the void for countless years were instantly shaken into dust. After the debris of the star's polar snow darted out, it flew for a distance and then vanished. Next, an infinite amount of cold air emerged from the center, and silver snowflakes floated up from the void, causing the surrounding crisscross chains to be covered in a layer of frost. At the same time, the debris of the star's raging flames rotated, and shone brightly in the pitch-black void, above Lin Li's head like a lotus flower, that was filled with flames of heaven and earth. The endless flames swept in all directions like massive waves of a flood, blocking the chains of law that blocked him outside. Under the stimulation of the stars of fury, the 3 pieces of the debris of the stars exuded a terrifying power that was simply unprecedented, and the light that was emitted from the laws it contained seemed to have been reflected throughout the endless world. The countless worlds of various sizes that were hidden in the void were fully exposed under the light of the law. Those worlds were the fragments of the worlds that were split when Manhwa was formed, and there were also the small worlds that had been expanded from the divine kingdoms left behind after the gods fell. Each small world contained a large number of living beings that were surviving and reproducing. Some were occupied by prehistoric magical beasts, and some were occupied by ancient clans that had existed for countless years. However, at this moment, the apocalyptic disaster did not only descend in Manhwa. The battle between Garesko and Lin Li was like doom to those thousands of small worlds. Boom, boom, boom. A series of explosions echoed in the void. The millions of chains of law were interwoven, and the small worlds hidden in the void barely had the power to resist as they began collapsing and disintegrating immediately upon contact. Even though they were only affected by the aftershocks of the power, it was as if they were tiny boats in a gale, and the entire worlds were turned upside down. My laws shall subdue the gods. Garesko did not have the slightest intention of showing mercy at all, and he raised his hand to point at the sky above him, after which the entire law divine kingdom emitted bright rays of divine light. Numerous illusory faces appeared on the countless chains of law, each full of pious devotion. They were murmuring like gods, and created a scene of a god's pilgrimage. Immediately afterwards, a chain of law that penetrated the void fell toward the lotus flower of the sea of flames, above Lin Li's head. With just one blow, it knocked the debris of the star's raging flames back to its original form, and fell towards Lin Li and his domain world without stopping. Lin Li could clearly feel that his current defensive power was probably insufficient for him to withstand the blow. Thus, he frantically yelled, "City of Destruction, Twin Trees of Eternity." With Lin Li's voice, the City of Destruction beneath his feet shook violently, and the Twin Trees of Eternity in the city enlarged thousands of times in the blink of an eye. The crowns of the eternal twin trees overlapped to form a giant green umbrella that covered the heavens and the earth before fusing with the sky of Lin Li's domain world. The chains of laws, which were like a galaxy, collided into the green umbrella formed by the twin trees of eternity, with a loud explosive sound. In an instant, the sounds of branches and leaves breaking filled the air, and the green leaves darted in all directions, as if green light had risen. In fact, these chains of laws were just like magic spells in the eyes of others, such as lightning, fire, and snow. However, the essence of everything was law, so in the eyes of Lin Li, who could already see the essence of it all, they were presented in the form of chains of law. Although Lin Li managed to block the blow that almost split everything in half with the help of the power of the twin trees of eternity, the violent fluctuations that came from it still made him feel a strong sense of suffocation in his heart, and his head began buzzing as if tens of thousands of flies had been stuffed into it. That was one of the flaws of his low level. Even the aftershocks of the impact could affect his fragile body significantly. Lin Li forcefully swallowed the blood that surged up in his chest. He then raised his arm at Garesko and hollered, "Fire together." In an instant, countless muzzles of cannons appeared in the City of Destruction. They were the sky breakers that dwarven craftsmen had built, and the magical crystal cannons produced by the Gilded Kingdom. The muzzles of these thousands of cannons flashed with the light of mana, and thousands of mana cannons were fired immediately. Facing a powerhouse like Garesko, a mere one or two sky breakers couldn't cause any damage to him at all. However, the salvo of thousands of massive cannons resulted in a qualitative change in the power of the cannons. The light of thousands of mana cannons fused together to form a mana light that was hundreds of meters thick, and then cut through the void in an instant, and darted at Garesko and the Law Divine Kingdom. Even ordinary's gods wouldn't dare to face the light of the mana cannons head-on, as it could even form a bottomless black hole in the ground on par with the Great Whirlpool if it were to blast into Anral. However, Lin Li knew very well that the cannon light was still not enough to threaten Garesko, so a ray of black light and a ray of white light were emitted from the Stars of Fury in his hand at the same time. Under the stimulation of the Stars of Fury, the power released by Holy Light and Gloomy Dark were far greater than what they once had. At the same time, under Lin Li's manipulation, the power of light and darkness remained as closely combined as they were in the light and darkness sword. Thus, their power was far beyond just the total of their power linearly combined. The power of Holy Light and Gloomy Dark was combined like a spiral, and under the cover of the mana cannons, they penetrated the giant net woven by the chains of law, instantly darting towards Garesko. The various chains of law that could seal heaven and earth on the trajectory of Holy Light before Garesko surprisingly collapsed and disintegrated too. The faces on the chains of law were distorted, and they began fading into nothing. That was the power of the Stars of Fury and the power of the debris of the stars that could be exerted under the stimulation of the Stars of Fury, which far exceeded the power that could be exerted when Lin Li was using the Stars of Fury alone. In comparison, the crossbow of reincarnation that Lin Li had created based on the Stars of Fury was just like a child's toy. In the face of Holy Light and Gloomy Dark, even Garesko couldn't help but be a little more serious as he braced himself by placing his hands in front of his chest, after which thousands of chains of law in the Law Divine Kingdom moved like snakes. The thousands of chains of law were intertwined, almost filling the entire void, and they moved towards the black and white pillars of light that seemed extremely small, like a train trying to run over a bug. However, the Holy Light and Gloomy Dark that had been shot out by the Stars of Fury did not collapse as soon as they came into contact with the powerful impact. On the contrary, when the two seemingly contrasting forces collided, the tens of thousands of chains of law twisted into a massive object, while the point of collision cracked, and countless fragments of law scattered everywhere, making the place look extraordinarily brilliant as if it was a huge fireworks display in the void. That was the power of the Stars of Fury. It allowed Lin Li, a small fry who had just reached the peak of the sanctuary realm, to suddenly have the ability and strength to fight against a god of the gods. In fact, even Lin Li was stunned by the power exerted by the Stars of Fury, and it turned out that the fair deal that Garesko said was indeed somewhat true. Of course, Lin Li did not rely solely on the Stars of Fury. Without the comprehension and mastery of the power of the 7 pieces of the debris of the stars, he might not be able to exert much power with the Stars of Fury even if he had it in hand. However, since Garesko dared to return the Stars of Fury to Lin Li, he naturally had great confidence in his own strength. As a powerhouse who was trying to break through the supreme law and achieve eternal immortality, everything would just be a joke to him if he didn't have the resolution to break through all obstacles. Garesko raised his right arm and pressed it into the void, after which there was a sudden violent tremor in space, and countless small worlds hidden therein collapsed as they were destroyed in it. In the Law Divine Kingdom, the countless chains of law danced and rotated, forming a huge divine throne of law beneath Garesko's body, after which numerous rays of light emerged from the Divine Kingdom, lighting up almost half of the void. At this point, Holy Light and Gloomy Dark had already broken through the blockage of countless laws, and darted straight at Garesko's Law Divine Kingdom, as if it were trying to penetrate it in one go. Garesko, who was seated on the divine throne of law, remained composed in the face of such a situation. He then raised his hand to grasp something in the void. Almost at the same time, ripples appeared in front of Holy Light and Gloomy Dark, and a crystal-like palm shot through the void to grasp holy light and gloomy dark. Bang! Holy light and gloomy dark was shattered by the crystalline palm. Moreover, although the crystalline palm was also covered in cracks, it still charged towards Lin Li and grabbed the enormous green umbrella that was formed by the twin trees of eternity. With the force of the crystal palm, both the twin trees of eternity and the city of destruction shook violently, and it was as if the twin trees of eternity were about to be uprooted by the crystalline palm. With a loud roar, the massive figure of Azardus, the dragon of destruction, emerged in the sky above the city of destruction. At the same time, the two heads of the dragons of destruction, on both sides of the city of destruction, turned over with their mouths wide open. The raging power of destruction then charged towards the crystalline palms that were grabbing the twin trees of eternity. Lin Li turned the stars of fury around and pointed it at the earth beneath his feet, and the power of the debris of the star's rebirth immediately caused the ground of the city of destruction to glow with an intense yellow light. Under the power of the debris of the star's rebirth, the swaying twin trees of eternity immediately slowed down and came to a halt, as if they were rooted to the ground and no longer growing on the city of destruction. Immediately afterwards, Lin Li turned the stars of fury in his hand again and pointed it at Garesco, who was sitting on the divine throne in the distance. 4 pieces of the debris of the stars, polar snow, raging flames, thunderbolt, and rebirth, suddenly darted out. The 4 pieces of the debris of the stars, which represented the 4 basic elemental laws, condensed into a 4-colored ray of light that immediately pierced through the void and appeared in front of Garesco in the next moment. Launching 4 pieces of the debris of the stars in unison was the most powerful attack Lin Li could use at the moment. The power of the 4 pieces of the debris of the stars shot in unison with the support of the stars of fury was definitely capable of destroying the world. Even powerful ancient gods would be instantly killed. Lin Li knew very well that only the power of 7 pieces of the debris of the stars combined could possibly defeat or kill an existence as powerful as Garesco. However, launching all 7 pieces of the debris of the stars at once not only required the support of the stars of fury, but it was also a huge challenge for him. When the 4 pieces of the debris of the stars reached Garesco, they suddenly came to a halt and hovered in space, as if they had reached a transparent barrier that prevented them from moving another inch forward. The 4 pieces of the debris of the stars kept spewing ferocious power that made the void collapse and broke the chains of law. However, Garesco, who was right in front of them, grinned and softly said, "Chaos." As Garesco said that, the 4 pieces of the debris of the stars that were originally moving in unison suddenly repelled each other, setting off a violent explosion immediately. It was as if a star had exploded. A mass of light that almost filled the entirety of his field of vision emerged, after which 4 rays of light shot out from that dazzling cluster of light. Indeed, it still takes the power of 7 pieces of the debris of the stars to win. Seeing that his powerful strike was easily diffused by Garesco, Lin Li's face immediately turned much more sullen and gloomy. At this moment, the crystal palm that had grabbed the crown of the twin trees of eternity previously finally shattered with a loud bang, under the full force of the attack of Azardus, the dragon of destruction. The palm then turned into countless specks of light that drifted away in the void. However, Lin Li did not have a single trace of joy on his face, because the connection with the city of destruction allowed him to understand the damage that the crystalline palm had brought to the city of destruction and the twin trees of eternity. Not only were the roots of the twin trees of eternity damaged, Azardus' soul had also clearly become much more illusory, and seemed to be about to dissipate at any moment. The dragon heads on both sides of the city of destruction were also drooping at the moment. Clearly, the counterattack that was launched just now had resulted in an overdraft of power. Lin Li had actually built the city of destruction to prepare for retaliation against a large number of prehistoric magical beasts. So many of the settings on it were made with that as the primary purpose. However, Lin Li did not expect to face Garesco, who had suppressed the gods. Thus, the power of the city of destruction could only play a limited role in this battle. The only thing he could rely on was still the combination of the stars of fury and debris of the stars. Lin Li tightly gripped the stars of fury in his hand, and 7 specks of light emerged from the stars of fury, rotating around it like satellites. After fending off the attack of the 4 pieces of the debris of the stars, Garesco launched his counterattack, and the chains of law that were constantly intertwining in all directions above his head and below his feet blocked out the space around Lin Li like a boundless ocean. As the chains of law filled the surrounding space, massive nomological power also engulfed Lin Li and the city of destruction. Enveloped by that powerful nomological power, Lin Li found it extremely difficult to even breathe, as if his soul was being squeezed to the point of being on the verge of shattering at any moment. What power is this? Is this the so-called supreme law? Under the oppression of the nomological power, Lin Li clearly felt that the mana in his body was almost suppressed, and the city of destruction even let out a sound that suggested that it was about to shatter. The leaves of the twin trees of eternity yellowed and withered, full of the sluggishness of late autumn. It was as if their life had come to an end. Lin Li pressed his left hand on the stars of fury, and the 7 specks of light that had been hovering around the stars of fury began to fly into it one by one. This is the last chance. Faced with Garesko's pressure, Lin Li knew he had reached the last moment, and if he couldn't seize the opportunity, it would probably be impossible for him to even fight for a chance to survive. Thus, regardless of what it took, he had to gamble with his life and put up a fight. A piece of the debris of the stars fell into the star fury, and the outermost circle of the Mageth on the stars of fury lit up. This was followed by the second piece of the debris of the stars, and the third. At the beginning, Lin Li was still having a relatively easy time. After all, he had launched 4 pieces of the debris of the stars in unison before. However, when it came to the 5th piece, dense spots of blood began to appear on Lin Li's body like he was bleeding. In particular, the expression on his face was distorted and hideous, while the veins at the corners of his forehead were bulging so badly that it seemed almost as if they were about to burst. The placing of each additional piece of the debris of the stars required twice as much mental strength as the one preceding it. The release of the 5th piece required mental strength that was already 16 times that of the first piece, and despite having a massive mental strength, Lin Li still found it difficult to withstand. However, 5 pieces of the debris of the stars were still far from enough to defeat Garesko. Lin Li gritted his teeth and forced himself to bear with the severe, splitting headache as he loaded the 6th piece of the debris of the stars into the stars of fury. This time, the amount of mental strength Lin Li needed to inject into the stars of fury immediately became 32 times that of the first. The last piece of the debris of the stars was nothingness, which symbolized time and space, and represented the power of chaos, among the 7 pieces of the debris of the stars. At this point, blood was already streaming out of the corners of Lin Li's eyes, mouth, nostrils, and ears incessantly, staining the magic robe on his body with blood. Reign supreme, destroy everything. As Garesko's voice resounded in the void, the law divine kingdom slowly rotated, just like a large millstone in the void, crushing the void and causing it to crack and shatter. The countless chains of laws flew through all of a sudden, scattering the layers of nomological power. As a result, Lin Li's domain world and the city of destruction seemed to have undergone millions of years of wear and tear as they became decayed and worn down. No, I can't do it anymore. Only the last piece of the debris of the stars was lacking, but Lin Li helplessly felt that his mental strength was already in overdraft and drained to the limit. This was no longer a matter that can be overcome by a strong willpower, as there was physically none left. There was no way he could gain more mental strength just by having a strong desire for more. Besides, the more terrible thing was that the massive nomological power of Garesko's law divine kingdom also had a great impact on the debris of the stars. Although with the suppression of the stars of fury, the debris of the stars wouldn't rebel, the resistance Lin Li faced when he tried to add another piece of the debris of the stars was constantly increasing. At this rate, the 6 pieces of the debris of the stars would be broken apart and scattered again before all 7 pieces could be shot in unison. Lin Li knew that he could not wait any longer. Perhaps the power of 6 pieces of the debris of the stars would be enough to defeat Garesko, he hoped. The moment the thought surfaced in his mind, his will to fight immediately dissipated. As if he was a person who had found an excuse to escape in the face of adversity, Lin Li no longer tried to add the last piece of the debris of the stars, nothingness, to the stars of fury, but directly raised the stars of fury and pointed it at Garesko, who was sitting on the divine throne of law. A brilliant light darted away from the stars of fury, while emitting a terrifying aura that obliterated everything in its path. The sky of laws that surrounded the exterior of the city of destruction disintegrated like wet paper when it was penetrated by that light. The countless chains of law dimmed in the blink of an eye under the influence of that power, and became like decaying rocks that soon disintegrated into ashes that scattered away amidst the shock. The power the 6 pieces of the debris of the stars converged was already enough to destroy Anril. This was the power of a god slayer. Even ordinary gods would probably be as defenseless as ants in the face of such an attack. In just an instant, the pending destruction created by Garesko was eliminated by the power of these 6 pieces of the debris of the stars. Boom! The light that had condensed from the 6 pieces of the debris of the stars bombarded Garesko's law divine kingdom with an unparalleled might. In the next instant, the solid walls of the divine kingdom shattered like glass, and the collapsing power of the laws formed a huge storm that caused the fragile void to collapse in large portions. As the void collapsed, several giant black shadows emerged. They seemed to be void beasts, legendary creatures unique to the endless void. Legend had it that the nether storms that gave even gods headaches were formed between the breaths of these void beasts. Once the barrier of a world began to decay, it would be time for the void beasts to appear and start feeding. However, this time, Lin Li and Garesko's battle caused a large patch of the void to collapse, awakening hidden void beasts in advance. Unfortunately, these void beasts, which only woke up once every 10 million years, awakened to face a disaster of extermination. The aftershocks of the collision between the 6 pieces of the debris of the stars and the Law Divine Kingdom spread millions of kilometers in the void. Before the void beasts in the void could react, they were torn into pieces by the aftershocks as soon as they woke up. Only a few void beasts at the edge of the area survived, as they did not even dare to look over, and merely turned around to flee. At this time, in the center of the battlefield, the light condensed from the 6 pieces of the debris of the stars had already shot over, and stopped in front of Garesko, as if it was already attached to the tip of his nose. The divine throne of law turned into the most basic particles, and began to crumble layer by layer like a sand castle. At this point, Garesko no longer looked as relaxed as before, as the frown on his forehead showed that the power of the 6 pieces of the debris of the stars shooting in unison had placed pressure, and posed a threat to him. Boom! Garesko finally took a step back, followed by another, and then a third and fourth, each step spanning a distance of thousands of kilometers. Each step he took would make the void where he landed crumble, leaving ripples like a dragonfly that touched the water's surface gently. Of course, regardless of whether those existences in the void were void beasts or worlds of various sizes, every step that Garesko took was like an apocalyptic disaster. Under Garesko's footsteps, almost nothing could exist, as everything was destroyed in an instant. After retreating several steps, Garesko slowly raised his arm and stretched out a finger to point at the light of the 6 pieces of the debris of the stars, which immediately stopped in front of him. In an instant, the light that erupted almost filled that void, making Lin Li's vision turn white everywhere, and only the sound of rumbling vibrations could be heard constantly. What exactly do I do? Lin Li's heart had been tensed up since he shot the 6 pieces of the debris of the stars in unison, which was already the limit of what he could do. If he couldn't defeat Garesko like that, it would probably be useless to try any harder. At that moment, the 6 specks of light flew back around the stars of fury, and together with the last piece of the debris of the stars, nothingness, they slowly revolved around the stars of fury. In front of Lin Li, the light that filled his entire field of vision gradually began to fade, and a figure gradually emerged from the fading light. Garesko. Watching that figure appear, Lin Li's heart sank into a bottomless abyss. Although Garesko seemed to be somewhat wretched and disheveled, there was a wisp of a smile on his face, though it was unclear if it expressed smugness or contempt towards Lin Li. Is this your limit? If that's the case, you might as well admit defeat. Garesko, who had already retreated far away, returned to the previous position opposite Lin Li in the void in the blink of an eye. At the same time, the damaged Law Divine Kingdom also quickly recovered at a speed visible to the naked eye, and a huge Law Divine throne once again appeared beneath Garesko's body. Yes, this is already my limit. What else can I do except admit defeat? Lin Li lowered his head, looked at the stars of fury in his hand, and let the chains of law again surround all the sides. Lin Li and his city of destruction were like 2 flies that had fallen into a spider's web. Their final fate was to become a meal in the belly of the predator. Lin Li had once thought that by holding the stars of fury in hand while gathering the debris of the stars, he would become the most powerful existence in the world and be able to kill gods. However, in the face of the powerful Garesko, Lin Li finally felt how powerless he was. Is this despair? In the past few years since Lin Li had transmigrated to Anral, he had experienced many battles with great disparities in strength between his opponent and himself, but he ended up being able to find a way to get himself out of the tricky situation every single time. However, this time, he did not know exactly what he should do. Launching 6 pieces of the debris of the stars in unison was already the limit of his mental strength, but he only wounded Garesko, so what else could be done but to admit defeat? Garesko, who was standing in front of the divine throne of law, looked at Lin Li as if he was waiting for something. However, in the end, his gaze dimmed slightly as he raised his hand and pointed at Lin Li, who had already lost his fighting spirit. Next, tens of millions of chains of law shot out from the Law Divine Kingdom like a swarm of snakes that were dancing wildly while rushing towards Lin Li like a flood of giant waves. Boom! The crown of the twin trees of eternity was the first to be hit, and they even seemed to have become much weaker, as if they had sensed the despair and desire to give up in Lin Li's heart. Under the bombardment of those countless laws, the twin trees of eternity lasted only for a moment before its branches and leaves withered like a dying tree. Immediately afterwards, the canopy of the city of destruction burst like a bubble as it barely played any defensive role. With the shattering of the canopy, the entire city of destruction also became dull immediately, while the light of the maggots that were initially in full operation dimmed one by one. The soul of Azardus, the dragon of destruction, transformed into a huge dragon shadow the size of the city of destruction, and lunged at the thousands of laws. However, as soon as they touched, Azardus' figure was instantly scattered like a reflection in water before it could roar. Countless roars filled the air, as if the city of destruction had been struck by a meteor shower, except that the aftermath was even more severe. All the buildings in the city of destruction suffered a destructive bombardment. Houses collapsed in the roar, destroying all the meticulously arranged maggots and magic arrays. However, the omniscient tower was still standing intact in the center of the city of destruction, as layers of light constantly emerged from the surface of the tower to repel all the attacks to the side. At the same time, Lin Li's domain world seemed to also be facing an apocalypse as the sky collapsed and the earth crumbled, leaving all living beings in a state of endless panic. Meteors fell from the sky of the domain world, destroying city after city, and the statues of the gods standing in the cities collapsed while wailing in pain. Those who were lucky to survive began to pray to their gods, and even though the statues before them were only half-built, the gaze in their eyes still looked so devout. Praying in despair, their power of faith kept converging, allowing the entire domain world to seem to be filled with the power of faith. At this point, the domain world, which was illusory at first, also seemed to have become tangible and real. Lin Li, who was in deep despair, suddenly felt a wave of power being injected into his body. It was a power that did not belong to any law, but one that was full of hope and expectation. In his mind, it was as if he could hear countless voices, telling him their wishes without sounding chaotic. Is this the power of faith? Strictly speaking, Lin Li should not have received the power of faith, since he did not ignite the divine fire yet. Without the burning of the divine fire, the power of faith would be like poison to him. However, Lin Li did not resist it, and opened the floodgate to receive it, allowing the surging power to pour into his body like a flood. Gradually, the power of faith he received was not only from his own domain world, but also from the hopes of all those who trusted him in Anral. With the power of the Tower of Dusk and the Eternal Furnace, the mages of the Tower of Dusk in Dulan fought fiercely against the titans that had returned from the spatial rift. Although the battle seemed really difficult, all the mages still had faith in Lin Li, and they believed that he would eventually save the world. The allied forces of the human race in the Sunset Mountains had already retreated to the temporary defense line, which the countless magical beasts of the Black Current were constantly impacting. The people of the Brilliant Shrine, Darkness Shrine, Felon Kingdom, Leaden Kingdom, and other forces were full of hope for the future while fighting the prehistoric magical beasts. Even in the Endless Ocean, the Gilded Kingdom, the Illuminati, and several sea clans also seemed to be hoping for Lin Li's appearance while fighting against the invading prehistoric magical beasts. All these people, who had pinned their hopes on Lin Li, unknowingly manifested a power of faith. It wasn't just faith in Lin Li, but more of a faith in hope, and Lin Li was the being on whom they placed their hopes. Perhaps the power of faith produced in the illusory domain world could not provide much help to Lin Li, but the power of faith from the real Anral was a true cohesion of the power of hope of all beings. This group of ignorant ants actually put their hopes on you. I wonder what kind of reaction they would have if they were to find out that you can barely save yourself now. As promised, come on and become one with me. Bear witness to my advancement to the realm of nothingness. Garesco said with a cold smile, and with a flick of his finger, the countless chains of law instantly wrapped around Lin Li and the omniscient tower, seemingly trying to crush them. As the chains of law tightened, the omniscient tower seemed to be groaning from inside as it was overwhelmed by the pressure. It was as if everything was going to end completely in the next moment. However, at this juncture, a wisp of white flames suddenly emerged from the gap in the chains of law. Then, more and more flames followed, engulfing the omniscient tower and making it seem like a huge torch. The white flames were full of divine aura, and they licked the surrounding chains of law, which started breaking upon being set afire, just like ordinary chains. With the collapse of the chains of law, the enveloped omniscient tower and Lin Li, who was standing on the tower's terrace, were finally revealed again. However, white flames were spewing from Lin Li's eyes, nostrils and ears, as if he was being burned from the inside out. Lin Li's space robe quickly turned into a pile of flying ashes under the burning of the white flames that enveloped every inch of his body. Every single pore of his skin was on flames, and he was just like a human torch. It was because the power of faith had been ignited, and without tempering with divine fire, Lin Li's mortal body simply wouldn't be able to withstand the burning power of faith. However, Lin Li did not have the slightest intention to stop. and even continued to increase the absorption of the power of faith. Lin Li's body became hard and smooth yet covered with cracks like overheated glaze. Flames would erupt from the cracks from time to time and pop like firewood. Soon, even the omniscient tower and the entire city of destruction were wrapped in the white flames of the burning power of faith, just like a blazing sun in the void. At this time, Lin Li not only did not resist the burning of the power of faith, but also channeled all his mana into the flame, making it the fuel for the power of faith. But that was not enough. Lin Li opened the ring of endless storm, and countless magical crystals flew out, be it legendary level or sanctuary level crystals. They all surged into the power of faith like water. After turning all the magical crystals into fuel, Lin Li added all sorts of rare and precious magic materials, including the divinity metal that he had brought from the endless world, together with a large number of rare herbs like the black lotus. Finally, he even threw some magical equipment into the flames. In the blink of an eye, they were burnt down to nothing. All that remained was a wisp of the purest power that merged into the ocean of Lin Li's mental strength, which was already in overdraft, and seemed nearly dry after the 6 pieces of the debris of the stars were launched. Now it was getting filled up again under this massive infusion of power. It's not enough. It's still not enough, Lin Li yelled in his heart, after which a staff flew out from the ring of endless storms. It was the moonlight staff that only the High Elves' lineage could use. It was the very same moonlight scepter that the immortal king had brought from the endless world when he transmigrated over using the Hunter Avatar, and which subsequently became the High Elven Queen's exclusive staff. The Moonlight Scepter initially seemed to only serve as a token that was used to retrieve the Stars of Fury from the great whirlpool in Lin Li's hand. Lin Li now found another use for the Moonlight Staff, and that was for burning. Shrouded in the flames of the power of faith, even the Moonlight Staff, which represented the supreme authority of the High Elves, barely lasted a few seconds before it was burned down and shattered with a bang in the blink of an eye. With the shattering of the Moonlight Staff, a pure and massive wave of power surged into Lin Li's sea of mental strength like a flood, causing the total amount of his mental strength to increase by an obvious amount too. Lin Li was truly making a desperate gamble now by putting everything, even his own life, on the line. If he couldn't defeat Garesco, both his life and soul would perish, and if that were to happen, it would be pointless to leave those things behind. The ring of endless storm was almost empty. Apart from insignificant items, all the things that were considered treasures in Anral, be it magic materials or magic equipment, were added to the flames of the power of faith. Even the ring made of the magical crystal of the evil eye tyrant, which Lin Li was wearing on his hand, and the Helios scepter that he had been using, were also burned away by the power of faith. The Helios scepter could be said to have accompanied Lin Li through many battles. Even though Lin Li now had powerful weapons, like the Stars of Fury and debris of the stars, and no longer relied heavily on the Helios scepter, he still had some emotional attachment to it. However, Lin Li didn't have the luxury to preserve these emotional ties and attachments at this juncture. Now that even his life was in danger, he obviously didn't have time or capacity to bother with this. However, the thing that truly provided great help to Lin Li was still the magical crystal of the evil eye tyrant, which had an incredible effect of allowing the wearer's mental strength to be enhanced. Now that it was directly burned by the flames of the power of faith, the huge mental strength contained in it was also released in one go. It was actually no less than even the mental strength provided by that moonlight staff. You actually burned the power of faith. At this rate, how long will you be able to sustain this even if you can defeat me? Garesco looked at Lin Li indifferently, watching him make his final struggle to survive. At this moment, Lin Li could no longer hear anything, and the only thought left in his mind was to defeat Garesco. Thus, he didn't respond to Garesco's words at all, and instead raised his arm, which was shrouded in the fire of faith, and pointed the Stars of Fury at Garesco with difficulty and great determination. Under the burning of the fire of faith, even the ancient touch and vicissitudes of the Stars of Fury faded away, revealing a silvery white holy power that covered its surface. Under Lin Li's manipulation, the 7 pieces of the debris of the stars hovering around the Stars of Fury also began to fall into the Stars of Fury one by one. The Stars of Fury was once again filled with 6 pieces of the debris of the stars, finally becoming the key deciding factor of the outcome. Lin Li had given up so much just for the sake of achieving his goal of launching all 7 pieces of the debris of the stars in unison. If he still couldn't load all 7 pieces, all of his previous efforts would go in vain. I've given all that I have, I will add nothingness now, Lin Li screamed in his head, and used the fire of faith to ignite his entire soul, setting off a massive storm in his ocean of mental strength. Under Lin Li's manipulation, the 7th and most crucial piece of debris of the stars, nothingness, drifted slowly towards the Stars of Fury. Watching Lin Li's efforts and actions during his last struggle, Garesco couldn't help but frown. As an opponent, he naturally couldn't watch Lin Li accomplish this smoothly. He raised his hands to his chest, and quickly made several magic hand gestures, after which the countless chains of law, that had been forced back by the fire of faith, erupted again with an extremely bright and dazzling light of laws. He then launched yet another attack at Lin Li, and the City of Destruction. The fire of faith could initially burn almost everything in this world, but Garesko was already a god of gods whose strength had exceeded that of Lin Li well by several folds. After all, with such a great disparity in strength, many things couldn't be measured according to common sense. For example, while water could put out fire, a large fire was going to evaporate a smaller volume of water. Hence, despite the fact that the massive wave, formed by the chains of law, which was enough to cover the sky, was blocked by the fire of faith, engulfing the exterior of the City of Destruction, it still pushed continuously with an enormous amount of power. It began closing in on Lin Li, as if it were trying to extinguish the fire of faith. However, Lin Li seemed not to pay any attention to that situation at all, as he was covered in flames, and no longer seemed to be in human form. However, he was still persisting, determined to load the last piece of the debris of the stars, nothingness, into the stars of fury while controlling it a little. Regardless of the outcome, he would let everything end completely in this moment. Finally, the last piece of the debris of the stars, nothingness, was loaded into the stars of fury. Immediately afterwards, the stars of fury vibrated, and almost flew away from Lin Li's hands as a brilliant ray of light appeared from nothingness, completely condensing on the stars of fury. The phantoms of the 7 pieces of the debris of the stars were gradually revealed above the stars of fury one by one. Rebirth represented the law of earth, polar snow represented the law of water, raging flames represented the law of fire, thunderbolt represented the law of wind. Holy light represented the law of light, gloomy dark represented the law of darkness, and nothingness represented the law of chaos of time and space. The phantoms of the 7 pieces of the debris of the stars fused into one in mid-air, and fell once again on top of the stars of fury. Rays of light erupted from the stars of fury, and that power even forced the surrounding fire of faith away, revealing Lin Li's figure in the fire of faith once again. However, at this moment, Lin Li's appearance was no longer like that of a human, and he looked just like a melting snowman instead. However, the hand that he had been holding the stars of fury remained intact, and his fingers were gripped tightly around the crossbow mechanism of the stars of fury, as he gently pressed it downwards. Boom! A vigorous storm was set off in the void, as if it had truly become a realm of nothingness, that was devoid of any existence. A resplendent pillar of light darted out from the front of the stars of fury, and everything in the void was frozen at this moment, be it the flames of the dancing fire of faith or the chains of laws that were being burned. Faced with the strike of the stars of fury, even Garesko, the so-called god of gods, seemed to have frozen in place as he could only watch the light of the 7 pieces of the debris of the stars charge towards him. There was only a light thud, without the roar of a violent collision. The chains of law and the barriers of the divine kingdom of law were all as fragile as paper in the face of the power of the 7 pieces of the debris of the stars. The light of the debris of the stars pierced through the giant wave of countless chains of law, followed by the barrier of the divine kingdom of law, and finally through the body of Garesko, who was sitting high on the divine throne of law. When the light dissipated, time seemed to have begun to flow again. Half kneeling on the terrace of the omniscient tower, Lin Li raised his head to look at Garesko, who was far away. The chains of law that filled the entire space burst into a cloud of flying ashes without the slightest tremor, and Garesko's divine kingdom of law seemed to be facing its doomsday as it began to crumble and collapse in large portions at a time. Garesko slowly stood up from the collapsed throne, with an ordinary-looking wound on his chest, resembling a hole left behind on an ordinary person who got shot by an arrow. However, golden divine blood gushed out of the wound incessantly, and trickled all the way to his feet before turning into a golden power that dispersed and scattered everywhere. Did I win? Although Lin Li had put everything he had on the line to make the 7 pieces of the debris of the stars shoot in unison, Garesko's appearance still seemed surreal to him at this moment. At this juncture, a faint smile appeared on Garesko's face, and it was pure and without any extra meaning. You've won. This is my last lesson for you. I hope that one day, you will be able to show me what kind of existence exists outside of this supreme law. Garesko said indifferently without the slightest trace of dejection or frustration due to his defeat. It was as if everything was normal. However, at this point, Lin Li could barely react as his body and soul were already on the verge of collapsing under the burning of the fire of faith. Lin Li did not know why Garesko said that. In fact, as long as Garesko held on a little longer, Lin Li might just die on his own. However, Garesko did not do that or continue to compete with Lin Li to see who could persist till the end. He covered his mouth with his hand and coughed lightly while shifting his gaze to the distant Anral. However, his body began to crumble at this moment like a sand sculpture, turning by layers into golden powder, that floated towards the depths of the void. Next, a sphere of light darted out from Garesko's body, and came close to Lin Li immediately before sinking into his flesh. As the light entered Lin Li's body, which had been burned beyond recognition by the fire of faith, the latter recovered rapidly as if time was passing in reverse. After some time, Lin Li finally stood up. Both his body and soul were damaged, and he could already clearly sense that his soul seemed to have gone through an indescribable change. Could this be what Garesko meant by making up for the flaws? Lin Li looked at the spot where Garesko was at previously, only to realize that it was already empty. Garesko's divine kingdom of law was no longer around, and it was as if everything had never existed. Lin Li recalled Garesko's last words, and felt that they didn't seem to be something that someone should be saying after getting defeated. There was no regret or indignation in his voice, but rather a heartened relief. "This is the last lesson I'm going to teach you." Lin Li felt as if Garesko's voice had rung in his ears again, and he couldn't help but have a change in perception. When he found out all the answers at first, Garesko seemed like a lunatic who could sacrifice everything in order to break through the supreme law. Although Garesko was undeniably still the same reckless madman who would do anything to break through the supreme law, Lin Li no longer had any resentment towards him. In his heart, there was even a trace of pity, though there was probably no one who had the right to take pity on Garesko's life. "Now that I can make up for the flaws, can I finally take that final step and ignite the divine fire to become an indestructible god?" Lin Li asked himself after sighing for a moment. At that moment, Lin Li suddenly discovered that deep within his soul, a faint wisp of fire, which seemed to be the legendary divine fire, was pulsating faintly. At this moment, a message from Garesko seemed to have appeared in his mind, allowing him to understand exactly how to take that step. Standing on the terrace of the omniscient tower, Lin Li turned to face the city of destruction, which was being burned by the fire of faith, and spread his mental strength out with open arms. In an instant, the fire of faith in the city of destruction broke away from the buildings, and surged towards Lin Li like a flock of birds returning to their nest, seemingly attracted to him. In fact, the burning of the power of faith was very closely related to the ignition of the divine fire. If Lin Li's soul had been flawless, the divine fire would have probably been ignited the moment the power of faith had started burning. Now that Lin Li had made up for the flaws, and even generated a wisp of divine fire in the depths of his soul, the next thing he had to do was to use the power of faith to continuously grow the divine fire. As Lin Li summoned, all of the fire of faith was absorbed into his body, and integrated into the original wisp of divine fire seedling, after which it gradually began to grow larger. It grew into the size of a candle flame, before quickly becoming a torch that was continuously growing and expanding. While the divine fire grew, it started to temper Lin Li's soul and body, burning away the impurities in his soul, and leaving behind only the purest essence. His body gradually became as crystalline and pure as crystal, while his soul also became ethereal and devoid of a trace of impurity. Lin Li's domain world, too, gradually began to solidify, turning from illusory to real. His domain world also started to become a true divine kingdom. All of the beings in the original domain world, who were constantly praying to Lin Li, felt the calling of a god, and began to pray devoutly, giving rise to a large amount of power of faith that condensed on the god statues of Lin Li. At the same time, those who were fighting against the invaders from the spatial rifts in Anril and those who had pinned their hopes on Lin Li also had a strange feeling at this moment. The wounds they had sustained and the power they had lost were actually restored at this moment. This is a miracle. It's a miracle. Even though they didn't know that Lin Li and Garesko had been fighting in the endless void, and that Lin Li had stepped onto the divine throne to become a truly indestructible god of this world, they could somehow feel that it all seemed to be related to Lin Li, President Fulik of the Tower of Dusk, whom they had pinned their hopes on. Lin Li finally opened his eyes, raised his hand, and waved it downward gently. Next, the city of destruction, which had been destroyed and nearly collapsed during the battle, surprisingly recovered at a speed that was visible to the naked eye. The twin trees of eternity, which had almost completely withered, also came back to life. In the blink of an eye, they became leafy and much lusher than before. Is this the power of the gods? Looking at the changes in front of him, Lin Li truly gained an understanding of the power of creation that the gods had. Hey, what's that? Lin Li was just about to go on to deal with the affairs of Anril when he suddenly noticed that one of the twin trees of eternity, which had undergone a reversal of life and death, seemed to have undergone some changes. There was a fruit hanging on a lone branch in the center of the crown of the tree, and it emitted an aura that seemed new, but somewhat familiar to Lin Li. The fruit was probably a part of the immortal king's brand left behind by Garesko. However, he didn't know if it would still have memories of Garesko or the immortal king after it ripened. Perhaps it would be a brand new life that had completely bidden farewell to the past. Lin Li withdrew his gaze and turned to the endless void, where a speck of light was flickering millions of kilometers away in the spot where the people in Anral were fighting against the invading creatures from the space-time rifts. Although Lin Li could not see the situation in Anral, he could sense the scenes of what was happening there through the power of faith that was full of hope. Although Lin Li had successfully ignited the divine fire after obtaining Garesko's seal, he was still far from reaching the realm of nothingness, which was beyond the supreme law that Garesko yearned for. However, even so, the menacing prehistoric magical beasts or the titans that had once dominated the world for a period of time were just like ants to Lin Li now. After igniting the divine fire, Lin Li could already easily use the 7 pieces of the debris of the stars in unison, and launching them together would not be as difficult as before. Even the powerful Garesko was defeated by the power of the 7 pieces of the debris of the stars, not to mention existences like those prehistoric magical beasts and so on. Of course, with Lin Li's current strength, it would only take a snap of his fingers to destroy those prehistoric magical beasts even without the use of the stars of fury and debris of the stars. He was now a true god, and what Garesko had left him was not just a mark and memory to make up for the flaws of his soul. In the blink of an eye, the city of destruction had been completely restored to its original form, or rather it had become even more powerful than before. After the burning of the fire of faith, the impurities of the entire city of destruction were completely extracted together with all the defect and hidden dangers in the construction. The city of destruction was now a truly powerful artifact-level weapon that only the gods could use. It was a city of gods. Initially, Lin Li thought that the city of destruction could be left to the Tower of Dusk so that the Tower of Dusk could become a force like the Supreme Council. However, the city of destruction had now become something that mortals couldn't control. Even its descent into Anral might cause a turmoil, so it was obviously not suitable for the Tower of Dusk. However, the good thing was that the Tower of Dusk still had the Eternal Furnace, which, although not comparable to the Sky Castle, was a top magic fortress in Anral. It's time to take care of those bugs that invaded Anral. Lin Li turned around to leave, but he suddenly stopped and turned his head to look in another direction of the void. Come out, you've been snooping around there for a long time, Lin Li said indifferently to the void. With Lin Li's voice, a ripple violently rose in that void, followed by an extremely large palace that squeezed into the void from the ripple. The gilded and resplendent palace was 1,000 feet tall and almost as huge as the breezy plains. It was like a golden world floating in the void. When the huge golden palace appeared in the void, the dazzling golden light immediately illuminated it. Compared to the sun that had been shining on Anral for thousands of years, it was much brighter and even more dazzling. There were more than 10 giants standing in a square in front of the gate of the Golden Palace. They were wrapped in intertwining rays of lightning and holding large pillar-like spears in hand. Titan's Pantheon. When Lin Li saw the appearance of the visitors, he immediately thought of that legend from the prehistoric times. The ancient Wyrms and the Titans had fought for supremacy in Anral, and the countless battles resulted in a double loss, with the remaining descendants of the ancient Wyrms disappearing in the dragon's tomb, while the Titans vanished from Anral along with the Pantheon. The Pantheon of the Titans was not for ancient gods, or any gods because they called themselves gods, and thus the Pantheon wasn't for them. The remaining Titans who had survived since the prehistoric times were not the only ones in the Pantheon. There were also the spirits of the Titans, who had fallen in the Great Wars, which was also the reason that the gods did not dare to underestimate this palace. At this moment, the leading Titan standing in the square of the Pantheon, who was much larger and stronger than his counterparts, was looking down at Lin Li from afar. With an arrogant smile, he said, "This is really a wonderful show. I never thought that Garesko, who was titled the God of Gods, would eventually fall in the hands of an ant like you." To the Titans, especially those who had the powerful Pantheon, Lin Li, who had just ignited the divine fire, simply didn't pose any threat at all. Since the prehistoric times, more gods had fallen at the hands of the Titans than there were grains of sand on the beach. Thus, in their eyes, Lin Li, a god whose divine fire had just been ignited, was actually not too different from those nobodies. Hearing the Titan's words, Lin Li wasn't angered at all, and a faint smile appeared on his face. He said, "The fact that you've been hiding from Garesko for thousands of years is indeed a remarkable achievement. Unfortunately, however, you shouldn't have come out at this time. Although I don't want to inherit any of Garesko's legacy, I don't mind fulfilling a small wish for him, since I've run into you now." While speaking, Lin Li raised the Stars of Fury in his hand, and the 7 pieces of the debris of the stars landed on it, after which a brilliant light enveloped the Stars of Fury. Without giving those Titans a chance to speak any further, Lin Li pulled the crossbow, and the light from the fusion of the 7 pieces of the debris of the stars instantly shot towards that majestic and large gilded palace. It was only at this time that those Titans, who had originally planned to come out and get some advantages, realized what a terrifying enemy they were facing. The power of the 7 pieces of the debris of the stars seemed to have made time stop in its tracks with a terrifying aura that seemed to be capable of destroying everything. It also made the Titans feel a strong sense of fear that they could hardly curb. At this moment, countless Titan spirits emerged from the Pantheon, waving their Thunderbolt Titan dragon spears while flying out of the Pantheon and charging towards the light of the 7 pieces of the debris of the stars fearlessly. The purpose of the existence of the Titan spirits was to guard the Titans' Pantheon, and any attack on the Pantheon would trigger a counterattack from them. These existences had transcended life and death, and thus were completely fearless. They had no other thoughts in mind, as all that they were focused on was their mission to guard the Pantheon against all odds. In fact, it could even be considered an instinct of theirs. In terms of combat power, the Titan spirits in the Pantheon were much more powerful than the living Titans, and it was because of their existence that the gods did not dare to strike the Pantheon, thus allowing the existence of the Titans to continue to this day. They even managed to escape Garesko's pursuit again and again. However, in the face of the light of the 7 pieces of the debris of the stars, those powerful Titan spirits dissipated one by one in the void like moths throwing themselves in fire before they could even come close. Hundreds and thousands of Titan spirits that the Titans had accumulated over tens of millennia dissipated in the blink of an eye. Afterwards, the light of the 7 pieces of the debris of the stars darted towards the Titans in the square without pausing at all. Those Titans were almost defenseless, and they exploded into a mass of flying ashes when the light passed by, as if they were made of sand. Boom! The light from the 7 pieces of the debris of the stars finally shot into the majestic Pantheon, and with a loud roar that caused the void to shake, the massive golden palace crumbled and fell apart. Lin Li waved his hand, and the 7 pieces of the debris of the stars flew back to his side, after which a huge vortex appeared in the void, and swallowed Pantheon together with the many remains of the Titans in the blink of an eye. Lin Li then reached out again, and grasped something in the void next to him. A huge rift opened to reveal a sea of endless flames, after which an ancient Wyrm that was engulfed in fire was grabbed and pulled out. Who is it that's disturbing my sleep? After the ancient Wyrm appeared in the void, it seemed to have been jolted awake as it let out a roar of fury. However, Lin Li was unbothered by the ancient Wyrm's roar, and he coldly said, "Enough, Lothar, stop pretending, or else I don't mind going to your dragon's tomb and getting rid of everything related to you Wyrms from this world." Hearing Lin Li's words, the flame dragon Lothar's body trembled slightly, and it turned to look at Lin Li, who had caught him and pulled him out of the fire elemental world. In a vaguely fawning tone, he said, "So it's you? I didn't expect you to have made such great achievements now. I merely came over to take a look because I felt the smell of those filthy Titans. I didn't have any other ideas. Regardless of whether you did or not, just keep hibernating since you've been sleeping in the fire elemental world for so many years." Lin Li didn't even bother to listen to Lothar's explanation, and simply raised his hand to draw a mageth in the void, and punched Lothar's body. Lothar, who was once the top powerhouse of the ancient Wyrms, was almost rendered defenseless, and fell into a deep slumber once again after Lin Li's mageth struck his torso. However, he couldn't control when he would wake up this time. It might be in 10,000 years, 100,000 years, or he might stay asleep for the rest of his life. After throwing the sleeping flame dragon Lothar back into the fire elemental world, Lin Li once again turned in the direction of Anril and pointed his hand at it, after which the 7 pieces of the debris of the stars shot away and disappeared in an instant. Almost at the same time, drastic changes occurred in Anril. The sanguine sky was suddenly replaced by endless sacred light, which caused the world, which was previously riddled with holes, to be restored to its original state rapidly, as if time was rewinding. The spatial rifts that had been opened in the sky and the depths of the earth were quickly sealed at a speed that was visible to the naked eye. As a result, the prehistoric magical beasts that were charging into Anril through the spacetime rifts were somewhat confused and puzzled as to what the changes meant. However, immediately afterwards, a divine punishment descended. Yes, for everyone in Anril, it was a divine punishment because it was a baptism of the entire world that could not be carried out by mortals. Meteors fell from the sky, each being an aggregation of a powerful force. Some emitted divine power, while some emitted dark force. There were also some that emitted all kinds of elemental power. The meteors then charged straight towards the prehistoric magical beasts that invaded Anril, as if they had grown a pair of eyes. In front of the defense line in the Sunset Mountains, Pope Rosario of the Brilliant Shrine, High Priest Sendros of the Darkness Shrine, and the generals of 2 kingdoms stood on the high defensive walls, quietly watching everything that was happening in front of them. However, they couldn't calm the shock and agitation in their hearts, and some even got on their knees to kneel to the god that had sent the divine punishment with extreme devotion and dedication of their faith. The black current in front of the defense line was already in complete chaos. Under the shock of that divine might, even the prehistoric magical beasts seemed to be losing their balance. Each meteor that landed on the black current made the prehistoric magical beasts vanish without a trace, regardless of their strength. Some titans landed on Duland and destroyed it while surrounding the Tower of Dusk, which had the eternal furnace. However, just a moment before the sky of Anril changed, several titans looked at a certain spot in the sky in confusion, seemingly having sensed the loss of something. However, before they could go berserk because of it, the divine punishment descending from the sky had already fallen on them. Several titans roared at the sky and exerted all the power they had to receive the divine punishment fearlessly. However, in the face of the divine punishment, the titans who once dominated the Anril were just like ants and were instantly overwhelmed by it. Next, with the destruction of the Pantheon, they died without the opportunity to become spirits and simply vanished from the world. The divine punishment, which lasted for several hours, began to dissipate. The brand new atmosphere of Anril, which had been baptized by the divine punishment, was revealed to the world. It was just like a brand new world, with rich magic elements and a thriving vitality. Under the power of Lin Li, the laws of Anril were completely restored after the disaster. The imbalance in laws caused by the collapse of the Tree of Eternity had vanished, and the space had become stabler than ever. Although the vast majority of people would not know what exactly had changed in Anril, every single person, even an ordinary one, who did not have any special power, could sense the difference in the world at this moment. The huge catastrophe that was disastrous enough to destroy Anril vanished with the descent of the divine punishment, and countless streams of power of faith immediately appeared in the continent, the endless ocean, as well as the faraway and mysterious eastern continent. They condensed into a majestic torrent of power of faith that charged out of Anril and surged into Lin Li's body immediately. Is this what it feels like to be a god? Lin Li quietly tolerated, or rather enjoyed, the infusion of the nearly endless torrent of power of faith. The divine fire in his body, too, burned more and more vigorously under the infusion of power of faith, rapidly transforming into divine power. However, Lin Li knew through the mark left by Garesco that he was nowhere near the peak of the divine realm, and could only be considered an elementary god at best. During the era of myths, when the gods had yet to be suppressed, his realm would be at best that of the servants of gods. Only when the divine power was condensed into godhood could he become a true god of a world. Of course, Lin Li no longer had any flaws now, and it was only a matter of time before he reached godhood. While absorbing a large amount of power of faith, Lin Li discovered a bizarre situation. As a god who could receive the power of faith, he could also clearly sense the source of the power of faith, which was one of the most basic abilities of a god. That was to allow the deity to know where most of their followers gathered so that he could obtain more power of faith. While Lin Li was continuously absorbing the power of faith from Anril, he discovered that the power of faith in the eastern continent was surprisingly more massive and purer than that from Anril and the endless ocean. Lin Li found it incredible that there were so many of his believers on the continent that he had never set foot on. Although Lin Li wanted to start condensing his power of faith to achieve godhood next, he couldn't help but want to see what the mysterious eastern continent looked like before that. There were many legends about the mysterious eastern continent in Anril. It was said that there was initially only one continent in Anril, and was dominated by the ancient Wyrms and the Titans. However, in the battle between powerhouses, Anril was shattered, and the eastern continent was one of the largest parts thereof. It was said to be mysterious only because it was difficult to reach smoothly by sea with the current navigation technology of Anril. The Gilded Kingdom in the Endless Ocean happened to be located between the two continents, so it had always been serving as a transit point. That was the reason that some people in Anril knew that humans and other intelligent races were living on another continent. However, the other land's situation couldn't be understood so easily. After all, even the voyage on the sea from Anril to the Gilded Kingdom was full of danger. For ordinary people, even the Gilded Kingdom was full of mystery, let alone the faraway eastern continent. Lin Li once had the idea of going to the eastern continent to see what it was all about. On the one hand, he wanted to see if there were any similarities with the East in the world he belonged to before he transmigrated. On the other hand, he had also once promised Ina that he would help her go to the Eternal Shrine to find her mother. Over the years, Lin Li hadn't managed to find a single clue on the Eternal Shrine in the Endless Ocean, so the eastern continent that he had never set foot on before was the only possible place left. Hence, before calming himself down to condense his godhood, Lin Li decided to first fulfill this promise. Otherwise, it would take him a long time to condense his godhood. Although the Endless Ocean could no longer be a hindrance to Lin Li today, he still could not descend to Anral with his true body at will. Thus, he could only use the method that was most often used by other gods to descend to the eastern continent. Fortunately, the 5 dragon aspects of Anral were no longer around. Otherwise, it would be troublesome even if he used a manifestation. Lin Li turned around and returned to the omniscient tower. Shortly afterwards, a ray of light darted out from the city of destruction, and fell straight into the eastern continent of Anral, the place where the power of faith was the densest. When Lin Li's manifestation opened his eyes and looked down, he saw thousands of uniformly dressed believers worshipping him under the lead of several old men, each with pious devotion in their eyes. Great Lord of Eternity, your light and glory are eternal and immortal, shining on us as we proceed forward. Thousands of believers prayed to their God with devotion, praising and thanking him for saving the world. Apart from continuing to receive a large amount of power of faith, Lin Li didn't put much thought into the praises of those people. However, he noticed that the believers had mentioned a Lord of Eternity when he was hearing their prayers, so he wondered if this was the Eternal Shrine. Soon, from the power of faith of the believers, Lin Li confirmed his suspicion that this was indeed the Eternal Shrine that he had been looking for, the origin of the Brilliant Shrine and Darkness Shrine. Furthermore, the Eternal Shrine also had an extremely high status in the Eastern Continent, just as the Supreme Council did in the continent of Anral. The Eastern Continent was much smaller than Anral 1, and it was roughly only about the size of 2 breezy plains. There were no kingdoms in the entire continent, so the humans and intelligent races were all ruled by the Eternal Shrine. However, the Eternal Shrine's ruling policy was almost without any harsh laws. After a long time, the believers finished their prayers, and left one after another, leaving only the few old priests of the Eternal Shrine, who led the believers in prayer. On the other hand, Lin Li's manifestation came out of the tall statue, and appeared in front of the old priests, thus startling them. They didn't expect that the god they believed in would actually descend, and appear in front of them. However, the one taking the lead, who should be the Pope of the Eternal Shrine, bowed to Lin Li respectfully without the slightest fear after seeing Lin Li appear, as if he had expected everything. He said, "Lord of Eternity, you have finally arrived." Hearing this, the several old priests at the back also reacted, and hurriedly bowed to Lin Li. At the same time, they each had an extremely fanatical expression. After all, not everyone could be so lucky as to see the deity they had believed in all their lives descend in front of them with their very own eyes. On the contrary, his reaction aroused Lin Li's curiosity. After sizing him up carefully, he suddenly thought of someone. He said, "I should be calling you the Pope of the Eternal Shrine, or rather Prophet Willen of the Brilliant Shrine." It turned out that Lin Li discovered that the person standing in front of him actually had a slight resemblance in appearance to the Retribution Knight Rodhart, and he couldn't help but think of the legendary Prophet Willen, who had vanished after sealing Rodhart. After hearing Lin Li's question, the man's expression didn't change much, and he merely calmly replied, "Lord, I am High Priest Willen of the Brilliant Shrine, and also Prophet Willen of the Brilliant Shrine." Only then did Lin Li realize that there wasn't a pope for the Eternal Shrine, but 7 high priests. Apart from Willen, there were also the High Priest of Darkness, the High Priest of Holy Flames, another 4 high priests who each represented an element, as well as a High Priest of Chaos. However, in the current Eternal Shrine, there were only Willen, the High Priest of Light, and the 4 elemental high priests. The positions of the 2 high priests of darkness and chaos had been vacant since the Dark Age. Seeing that Willen had admitted his identity, Lin Li didn't have any intention to make things difficult for him. Thus, he merely nodded, and said, "Well, no matter what your identity is, I am descending this time to find out about the Eternal Shrine, and to look for someone." "Who are you looking for, Lord?" "As long as he is on this continent, we will definitely be able to find him as long as we do our best," said an old man behind Willen, who had a flame painted on the chest area of his robe. It was none other than the High Priest of Holy Flames, Garona, and he frantically responded when he heard that Lin Li was about to give instructions. Lin Li smiled and ignored his interjection. Instead, he reached out and took out a half of an iron arrow before saying, "I don't know that person's name, but I'm very certain that she is from the Eternal Shrine. She probably visited Anral 20 or 30 years ago. If she's still alive, bring her here." When the several high priests heard that the person Lin Li was looking for was someone from the Eternal Shrine, the expression on their faces immediately became less tense. After all, even with the status of the Eternal Shrine in this continent, finding someone aimlessly with barely any clues wasn't something that could be done in a short period of time. However, by the time they saw the half of the arrow in Lin Li's hand, they couldn't help but have a change in expression. "What, is there a problem?" Lin Li noticed the change in their expressions, and couldn't help but feel his heart sink as he wondered, is Ina's mother no longer alive? "No, no, please take a seat while we go bring the person here, Lord," the several high priests said in unison. They then respectfully excused themselves to go find the person Lin Li wanted to see. On the other hand, the high priest of light, Lin, remained beside Lin Li with a calm expression as usual. He then led Lin Li into the Hall of the Shrine at the front of the square. Lin, tell me more about you. There were many speculations about your disappearance in the Brilliant Shrine, but I'm afraid no one would have thought that you had actually come to the Eastern Continent and became the High Priest of Light of the Eternal Shrine. Lin Li did not have the attitude of a god at all. He casually found a seat in the hall and sat down. Although Lin Li behaved casually, Lin did not dare to act recklessly, and respectfully stood to the side instead of sitting down without permission. It was not only because they regarded Lin Li as the Lord of Eternity, but also because of their awe of Lin Li's great strength. Even though Lin's strength was already at the peak of the sanctuary realm, or he could even be considered a demigod, he was still too far from Lin Li, a god who had ignited the divine fire. After hearing Lin Li's question, Lin seemed to organize his thoughts before he slowly revealed the reason he had come to the Eastern Continent. In fact, Lin Li had already more or less guessed that Lin's main purpose for coming to the Eastern Continent was to find a way for his brother Rodhart to recover. That was also the reason that when Lin first stopped Rodhart, he chose to only seal Rodhart instead of purifying him. However, Rodhart became a retribution knight due to the contact with the death aura of the Immortal King. Later on, he even obtained an arm of the Immortal King. It could be said even the Immortal King could not restore Rodhart to his original form, let alone Lin. Thus, Lin couldn't find a way to save Rodhart in the Eternal Shrine until Lin Li purified Rodhart. Besides, when Lin was in the Brilliant Shrine, he was known as the Son of the Holy Light, in addition to being a prophet, which was the very reason that he was the High Priest of Light of the Eternal Shrine. If he was the Darkness incarnation, as said by the people of the Darkness Shrine, he would probably be the best candidate for the High Priest of Darkness in the Eternal Shrine. After chatting with Lin Li soon heard the sound of hurried footsteps coming in from outside. Clearly, the people of the Eternal Shrine really didn't dare to delay when facing the orders of a god. With the sound of footsteps, a few of them walked into the hall of the shrine. Apart from the high priests who had just left, there was another haggard-looking woman who was about 40 years old. She shared a vague resemblance to Ina, and Lin Li was almost certain that he had found the right person. However, once he scanned Ina's mother's body with his mental strength, Lin Li frowned and asked the high priests in a deep voice, "Can any of you explain to me what is wrong with the condition of her body?" "Lord, please forgive me." Lilia was once the saintess of the Eternal Shrine, but she lost her purity when she traveled to Anral for training. Therefore, she was subject to punishment upon returning to the Eternal Shrine. Thus, she was stripped of her title of saintess, and was to be confined for life. Seeing that Lin Li was obviously enraged, the several high priests were so frightened that they almost knelt on the ground, not daring to hide the real reason at all. Lin Li hated the concept of a saintess the most. The gods could have any beautiful women they wanted. Why would they need a group of mortals to take it upon themselves to choose a woman and make her serve a saintess? Forcing a woman in her prime to give up her future and abandon her own happiness just for the sake of an ethereal deity was such a perverse system. However, Lin Li had obtained a large amount of power of faith from the Eternal Shrine, after all, so he didn't hold it against them. He merely raised his hand, and a pillar of light from the void shone on Lilia's body. Not only did it heal the ailments in her body, it even helped raise her power to the sanctuary realm. Seeing Lin Li's actions, the several high priests lowered their heads even more as beads of sweat appeared on their heads. Although they had already guessed that the Lord of Eternity had to have a reason for searching Lilia, the former saintess, when they received the divine oracle to bring her here, they didn't expect that she would be so highly regarded by the Lord of Eternity. For ordinary people, reaching the legendary realm was already a very rare thing, and yet the Lord of Eternity helped Lilia advance straight to the sanctuary realm, which was simply a godsend of a favor that left them in envy. Lilia also seemed rather excited too, but it wasn't because of the power she gained. She raised the half of the arrow in her hand, and hopefully asked Lin Li, "Where did you get this thing from? Are you the original owner?" Although Lilia had used honorific words, the several high priests still felt that she wasn't being respectful enough to the great Lord of Eternity. However, when some of them raised their heads and were about to rebuke Lilia, they saw Lin Li's nonchalant expression. Reckoning that Lin Li wasn't offended by her attitude, they quickly kept quiet. Lin Li didn't answer Lilia immediately, and instead said to the high priests, "I won't hold this matter against you. If you believe in me and worship me as your lord, don't do such things again in the future, and don't confer any more so-called saintesses." Although he was called the Lord of Eternity, Lin Li believed that he became a god because there was hope in his heart, as well as in those who believed in him. Technically speaking, Lin Li should perhaps be called the God of Hope, and since he became a god because of hope, How could he diminish the hopes of his believers? When the several high priests heard Lin Li say that he would not pursue their responsibility for this matter, they immediately wiped away the sweat on their foreheads, and answered in unison, "Yes, Lord, we will obey you, and never confer any saintess titles again." Lin Li nodded, and turned around to say to Lilia, "You have a daughter in Anral named Ina, don't you? This half of the arrow was handed to me by Magreen before he passed away in hopes that I could find her mother." Magreen. Lilia was instantly devastated to hear of the demise of her lover. Fortunately, Lin Li had just given her power of the sanctuary realm, otherwise, she would have probably fainted now. However, immediately afterwards, she thought about her daughter. Since her lover had died, what could have happened to her daughter? Thus, she asked, "Well then, is Ina all right?" Lin Li raised his hand in the void next to him, and a gate of light slowly appeared. He then said to Lilia, "If there's nothing else for you to do here, you'll be able to see your daughter by passing through this gate. However, after meeting her, please do not mention me to her." At this point, Lilia no longer cared to consider why Lin Li deliberately told her not to mention him, as she was overwhelmed with the joy and anxiousness of being able to see her daughter soon. She didn't hesitate or doubt the authenticity of Lin Li's words. Instead, she just stepped through the gate of light and walked straight in. In the Silver Hands campground, Lilia appeared in front of Ina, and after a moment of silence, they spoke for a while and embraced each other with joy. Seeing this scene through the gate of light, Lin Li finally felt relieved and raised his hand. With a wave of his hand, the gate of light turned into countless specks of light. After fulfilling his promise to Ina, Lin Li could now concentrate on condensing his godhood. However, when leaving the Eternal Shrine, Lin Li noticed that the statue erected in the middle of the square of the Eternal Shrine surprisingly resembled him a little. When he thought about it, Lin Li understood that the statue was not him, but the Immortal King. The founder of the Eternal Shrine had always been a mystery, and even the great priests of the Eternal Shrine, such as Willin, probably weren't clear about who the founder was, either. They only knew that the Eternal Shrine had existed in Anral even before the Dark Age. That had also touched Lin Li's soul. As he fused Garesko's memories, he immediately understood the true origin of the Eternal Shrine. The Immortal King was not a high elf, but a humanoid that was formed from the immortal tree of the Twin Trees of Eternity, and then traveled around the Anral and founded the Eternal Shrine. Afterwards, the Immortal King fell in love with the High Elven Queen, and used most of the resources of the Eternal Shrine on the High Elves to help them prosper, thus becoming an important cornerstone of the High Elves' rise. Later on, the Immortal King even moved the Eternal Shrine to the distant eastern continent, in order not to let it affect the High Elves' development. He had to admit that the Immortal King was really devoted when it came to love, as he was willing to even abandon the Eternal Shrine, which was his own creation. Of course, based on the later events, the Immortal King was revealed to be ruthless in other aspects too. For the sake of his pursuit of the opportunity to break through the supreme law, he reincarnated as Garesko, and single-handedly exterminated the High Elves. In any case, he was definitely a ruthless man, who was harsh on others and even harsher on himself. In the endless void, the city of destruction was shrouded in a layer of divine light, after which it vanished without a trace with a slight tremor. In the breezy plains, peace was restored in the Tower of Dusk, but the massive city of destruction in the sky was no longer present. No one knew where the young President Flick and the huge city of destruction had gone, nor did they know when they would return again. Time passed day by day, and in the blink of an eye, a year had already passed. Dulan City, which got destroyed in the catastrophe, had already been re-established on top of the ruins. Under the lead of Basil, Gavin, and the others, the Tower of Dusk grew slowly but steadily. However, their president still hadn't returned yet, and the city of destruction hadn't appeared in the sky above the Tower of Dusk, either. Another year had passed, and with the migration of people from other places, the liveliness and vitality of Dulan City was gradually restored. The number of mages from all over the breezy plains who joined the Tower of Dusk had almost doubled again. Thus, the magic city under the tower had to be expanded again. However, the president and the city of destruction still hadn't returned. 2 years passed, and then 3. In the blink of an eye, 5 years had already passed, and someone suggested that Basil, the chief judge of the Tower of Dusk, take over the position of the president of the Tower of Dusk. However, Basil rejected that suggestion because in his heart, as well as in those of Gavin and the others of the Tower of Dusk, they would only ever recognize Lin Li as their president. On this day, the vampire Norfaller stepped out of the black front fortress of the Eternal Furnace, and appeared in front of Basil and the others for the first time in 5 years. However, when facing the crowd that was full of expectation, Norfaller merely said, Basil, Master wants you to take over as the president of the Tower of Dusk. We want to follow him. After saying that, Norfaller disappeared in front of the crowd together with Ulfalucy and the Retribution Knights in the Black Front Fortress. A few months later, Basil officially took over the position of the president of the Tower of Dusk, becoming the second president. The various forces of the Breezy Plains, the Supreme Council, Brilliant Shrine, Darkness Shrine, Leaden Kingdom, and Felon Kingdom, and even the Gilded Kingdom and Kingdom of Rotterdam, had sent emissaries to attend the inauguration ceremony. However, such a pompous and grand ceremony didn't make Basil and the others happy at all. Instead, it put great pressure on them. After all, the Tower of Dusk now was no longer the same as what it used to be when Lin Li was present. Now, the major forces had all sent their emissaries only because of Lin Li. They were still showing some respect to the Tower of Dusk now because of Lin Li, but what about it in the long run? Therefore, securing the current status of the Tower of Dusk was still a difficult task for Basil and the others. However, the Tower of Dusk was developing well now. Not only did they have a mage legion comprising of legendary mages, they had also recruited many magic geniuses in the last 5 years. With the various resources left behind by Lin Li, the future of the Tower of Dusk would definitely be glorious and promising as long as nothing went terribly wrong. They could definitely become a powerful force, on par with the Supreme Council. Of course, more importantly, even though Lin Li was no longer in the Tower of Dusk, many people knew that he didn't get into a mishap during the catastrophe. The divine punishment that had shrouded the entire world had not only saved Anril, but also became a huge deterrence left behind by Lin Li. Afterwards, Lin Li became a mythical figure in Anril, right after the immortal king in Garesco. On the other hand, the Tower of Dusk also became a magical sacred land in Anril, which was a fact that no one could ignore. After the inauguration ceremony of Basil, Jarian sighed and returned to his room, where he looked out the window at the lively scene of the bustling magic city. However, he felt more and more depressed because he knew that Lin Li, who was even more cunning than himself, was now a god who was high and mighty. Hence, Jarian was no longer sad about Lin Li's departure, but when he recalled the first time he met Lin Li, followed by the auction of potions that they went to, and then the time they dealt with the Merlin family, he couldn't help but be emotional, because it all seemed to have happened just yesterday. Damn, Fulik, you rascal, you went to become a god. What's so fun about that? It's been such a long time, why haven't you come back to visit? Jarian cursed, but he suddenly turned his head to look at the table at the side, seemingly having sensed something. At this moment, there was suddenly a vial with potion glowing with white rays of light on the table that had originally been empty. Jarian took 2 steps forward, reached out, and picked up the potion before scanning every inch of the room, only to realize that there was nothing unusual. He then lowered his head and looked carefully at the potion that had popped up out of nowhere, only to see a small line of words appearing on the potion bottle. Super Viagra, restore the masculinity of men. Old man, time to find yourself a partner. Who's pulling a prank on me? That was Jarian's first reaction, but he soon noticed that this potion bottle wasn't ordinary, and seemed to be the Dream Crystal potion bottle that Lin Li used to use exclusively. One reason that Jarian was so certain about it was naturally because he had seen such a potion bottle at Lin Li's place before. Another reason was that the Dream Crystal was so rare that it was probably difficult to find another potion bottle like that in Anril. Even if there were other Dream Crystal potion bottles, who would pull a prank on him with such a precious item? Jarian did not go around looking for Lin Li again, because he knew that there was naturally a reason Lin Li chose not to appear. Even if he tried to find him, his efforts would be in vain. He could only hold the potion bottle up and look out the window at the sky with some tears in his eyes while he started cursing. In the jungle of the Higa mountain range, a small team of adventurers and a group of magical beasts were fighting intensely with each other. There was a burly black bear-like man who was more than 2 meters tall standing in front of the team while brandishing a large double-edged sword that looked like a door. It split an arrow-back magic lizard in two. However, after the giant killed another demon lizard, a suit of armor that could not have been hidden in the demon lizard's carcass magically dropped out of it. The giant swept away the numerous demon lizards that charged over, reached out, and picked up the armor, only to be stunned. Clearly, he was confused about how it came about. An old man walked over from behind the giant and patted his back. Sean, if I'm not mistaken, this armor should be the dark gold magic dragon armor that your friend bought at the Gilded Kingdom's auction back then. I didn't expect that he would give this armor to you using such a method. Sean snapped back to his senses and turned his head to look at the old man. Still baffled and bewildered, he asked, "Are you saying that this armor was sent by Mr. Fulik? But how did he manage to shove such a large armor into the lizard's belly? He could have just handed it to me, personally. It's been such a long time, Since I last saw him, he's a god. What can he not do? If you want to see him, you have to work hard, and maybe you can become a god like him too one day." The old man sighed, and patted Scene's back again because he wasn't tall enough to reach his shoulders. "Yes, I will. I said before that I still want to be Mr. Fulik's follower." Sean nodded with determination, as if becoming a god was just as common a goal to him as moving up a rank. In the Sky Garden of the Supreme Council, Speaker Andoin headed to his pharmaceutical lab, as usual after handling the matters of the council. However, when he walked into the lab, and was about to challenge himself by concocting an advanced potion, he stood in front of the concoction table and was stunned. There was a notebook on the table, on which there were several large words, written on it, "The Book of the Great Potion Divine Smith, Fulik." Andoin was suddenly a little excited. "It's been so many years. Is that rascal finally willing to pass down the secret potion formula to me?" Andoin's hand trembled as he opened the notebook, and flipped straight to the last page, in a bid to see if he could concoct a master level, or even a guru level potion. However, there was no potion formula on the page that he flipped to, but a line of words, written in red: "To refine a guru level potion, you have to start from the basics. Teacher, if you don't want to blow up the Sky Garden one day, you have to start learning pharmaceutics from the basics." Later on, Andoin discovered that regardless of which page he turned to, he could only see that same line of words. The basic pharmaceutical theory was written only on the first page, making it the only proper content of the entire notebook. In other words, he couldn't browse the contents of the notebook freely as he pleased. Instead, he would have to reach a certain level of proficiency in pharmaceutics before he could read the content of the next part of the book. "I have been concocting potions for so many years, and no matter what, I should be considered a senior pharmacist, right? Yet, he wants me to start learning from the first page." Andoin griped, but he had no choice but to accept the arrangement, because he discovered that the contents of the first page were actually all things he did not understand. In the Emerald Tower of the Jaros's Guild of Magic, President Kevin had just finished his meditation, and walked out of the meditation room. Along the way, he greeted the mages of the Guild of Magic, and returned to the top floor of the tower. Standing on the terrace and looking out at the small Jaros's city, Kevin couldn't help but look into the distance while lamenting emotionally. Who would have thought that a mage from such a small and remote place would leave, and become a mythical figure alongside Garesko? Kevin looked away and turned around to return to the room with the intention of reading through the several magic books that the Tower of Dusk had sent to them. However, apart from the magic books, there was surprisingly a peculiarly shaped staff, which was about 50 or 60 centimeters long on the table. It was dark red in color, with a cloasa handle and an egg-sized gemstone embellished on the top. "Is this the Helios scepter?" This staff on Kevin's desk surprisingly resembled the Helios scepter that Lin Li had once used greatly. Or rather, this was perhaps the Helios scepter itself. Although Lin Li had burned even the Helios scepter in the fire of faith, in order to launch the 7 pieces of the debris of the stars in unison during the battle with Garesko, he had since become a god, so it was a piece of cake for him to craft another Helios scepter, especially with his high attainments in forging. Lin Li's figure appeared in the sky above the great whirlpool without the aura of a god at all. The city of destruction had surprisingly also shrunk to the size of a fist as it hovered and revolved above his shoulders. He looked away from Jaros's city, and glanced at the sky and earth before finally making his way up to the sky step by step, as if he were walking up a stairway to heaven. Finally, he vanished from this world together with the great whirlpool. Ring, ring, ring. Upon the crisp and clear ringing of a bell, a hand reached out from under the duvet, and smacked the top of the alarm clock. Lin Li got out of bed, got dressed, and walked to the window where he pulled open the curtains, and looked at the skyscrapers outside, followed by the endless traffic of vehicles cruising on the road below. The experience that he had in Anral was just like a dream, and the only proof of its existence was the city of destruction, which was hovering and rotating on the table beside him. If one were to look at it through a magnifying glass, they would find that knights in armor were carrying out a drill in the parade square in the fist-sized city, looking like a bunch of ants. Norfaller, who was clad in a butler attire, knocked on the door and entered. He respectfully said, "Master, breakfast is ready." "Okay, I'll head downstairs soon," Lin Li answered, but he didn't move. Instead, he looked out of the window at the rising sun, and muttered to himself, "The supreme law. How am I going to break the supreme law of this world?"
Thank you for watching Mystic Realms Recap. Please like, share and subscribe. Have a great day.